metaphorically. There's not the Holy Spirit. It's said as one video. I don't know what they're talking about.
Dude, we're live, and you're still
sorry.
impersonating Jordan Peterson. Hey, everyone. Well, my TikTok Time to Rock intro was completely ruined by, I don't even know what to call you. I already called you Gay Wizard the other day, but...
Oh, yeah. My name is Gerald.
Hey, how you doing, AP?
Good. How are you?
Hey, man, Avery. Hey, what's this? Avery put the wood to the Orthodox Muslim? What's that? What happened?
Apparently, he went onto the Orthodox Muslim's channel and started arguing with him. I only saw a thumbnail which said, God logic destroys Orthodox Muslim or something like that. I don't know what that was about.
These dudes better get used to it because that's going to be happening an awful lot here in the very near future. It's already been happening, but going to happen quite a bit more. So right before we started, we were chatting because I just found out, and I found out because I saw someone in the chat before the show mentioning what was said was Jordan Peterson surrounded by all those atheists. Now I know how Muhammad felt with the men of Al-Zut. And I was like, what? Why would Jordan Peterson be surrounded by a bunch of atheists? And I was like, oh, wait, did he do a Jubilee thing? And then I went and looked, and yes, it was out today. And if I had known it was out earlier, we would have gone through that. But I actually really like this discussion between Alex and John Lennox. And we're going to get to the section I haven't watched here. So actually looking forward to this very interesting discussion. But also looking forward to the Jordan Peterson versus 20 atheists. Isn't that weird, though? Like, that would not be the guy you would pick.
There is apparently also a problem, which is apparently they titled it One Christian versus 20 Atheists, which is why people had it like that in mind, and also had it before them, apparently. But there seems to have been some miscommunication because Jordan Peterson during the show also says, who says I'm a Christian? You're saying that. I didn't claim that. So,
oh, wow.
And then after the show was over, apparently after they published it, several hours later, they changed the title into One Christian, and then in brackets, Jordan Peterson versus 20 Atheists. And then they changed it into Jordan Peterson versus 20 Atheists. And now everyone is talking just about the title changes.
That's pretty sloppy right there. Like, you should have been clear on everything beforehand. Two, you should have been clear on things by the time you're publishing the video. So that's just weird. So just to be clear, everyone, Jordan Peterson knows a ton of stuff about psychology, has lots of awesome, interesting insights in psychology, interesting psychological insights into the writing of the Bible, things like that. Is this the guy you'd get to talk to a bunch of angry atheists? No. Wouldn't even be like in my top 1,000. Keep in mind, I think he has important things to say to atheists. It's not the sort of thing that would work in the Jubilee context where it's just people like firing at you and you got to fire back at them real quick and stuff like that. So anyway, there are other people who would be, I'm trying to think of people who'd be good specifically in that format, but that would be someone like Mike Jones, Inspiring Philosophy, would be good in that format. Some of the Christian apologists like, Frank Turek and stuff like that. So some of the guys who go onto college campuses and argue with these guys and so on. But yeah, not Jordan Peterson. He's calm. He kind of takes a while to convey what he's trying to say because it's usually some deep stuff. But that's the sort of thing that you just can't do in sort of a rapid fire 20 atheists firing off objections at you and stuff. So anyway. Hang on. Hey, check this out. So Mike Jones, we set this up like a month ago or something like that. Mike Jones Inspiring Philosophy. He said he's going to post a video on the Islamic dilemma, and then wait a month, and then we'll respond. We'll see how the Muslims respond to his video, and then we'll do a live stream on his channel going through it. And so the plan was, he had these other videos where they're responding to the scientific, where they're using the scientific miracles of the Quran. So he said, hey, why don't we have one day where we respond to the their objections to the Islamic dilemma on his channel, and then the next day we'll go through these scientific miracles in the Quran TikTok videos the next day. So those 2 days were tomorrow and Tuesday. We're going to be tomorrow on his channel going through Muslim responses to the Islamic dilemma. And then Tuesday was going to be on my channel. He was going to send me these TikTok Quran scientific miracle stuff that we've already refuted 1 trillion times, but for some reason has reemerged over on TikTok. Anyway, I'll message him right now and ask if he would like to instead go over some of the Jordan Peterson Jubilee thing. So I will say, yo, since the Peterson, hang on, let me see. Since the new Jubilee just dropped, what do you think about going through some, gosh, I type slow, some of that?
Hey, look at my sweater. Look at my sweater. Look at this. You see? Make Istanbul Constantinople again. You see?
What? Hey, why don't you start, Mark? Why don't you start selling those, man, merch? Hang on. Let me just make sure.
I should.
Yo, since the new Jubilee just dropped, what do you think about going through some of that on Tuesday instead of the science stuff, which we can do a different day?
That's true. That's funny.
We'll see. He might he might already be planning to do something on that, so he might want to do the science stuff. Anyway, all right, just dropped that. We'll see what he says. That's Mike Jones. That's Mike Jones.
Who?
Mike Jones. Who? Mike Jones. Jones got love for my friends till the day that I'm gone. What? Hey, did anyone watch the Jubilee thing?
So the thing is, I saw a clip earlier of it. It looked pretty bad. Somebody shared it with the Hodge twins, those two dummies. They shared a clip saying, "Well, this kid destroyed Jordan Peterson," and I checked it out. And it was this very, very entitled little brat kid discussing with Jordan Peterson, who already looked quite impatient at that point, and was asking questions about Catholicism and what worship means and all that. And then he started being kind of annoying. And Jordan Peterson was like, "Don't be a smartass," and I mean it. And then he's like, "I'm not being a smartass." Then he keeps discussing at him and being a very, very entitled little brat. And then says at some point, "You're a Christian, aren't you?" And he says, "Well, you say that. I didn't claim that." And then he says, "Well, what's the title? You don't even know where you are. You don't even know what YouTube video you're in," he says to Jordan Peterson. And then Jordan Peterson says, "Oh, you're quite something, aren't you?" And then the kid says, "Well, and you're quite nothing." And then,
whoa!
Jordan
Talking to
Peterson
some little dorks talking to Jordan Peterson like that?
Yeah, and Jordan Peterson goes like, "Oh, all right, I'm done with you." And then the kid walks up and goes away. That's all I saw. It's like, really, man? That's what that is for? Like,
dude, this is I have to say, people, how do I put this? Sounds
Show me a smart ass now.
There are people that could conceivably be on your side in certain ways, and it's good to have them on your side in certain ways. And it's the same thing that happened with Muslims. Like, Peterson's trying to build bridges and stuff like that and get everyone on the same page so they can confront the most heinous evils in the world. So, hey, everyone who's not part of the most heinous evils, we should all be on the same side. So Peterson thought, hey, I could actually get Muslims, nice Muslims on the same side with me. And so, hey, get a pen pal. Let's all work together, eh? So he tried, let's all get together at Tim Hortons and sip maple syrup, and then we'll all be buddies, right? Hey? So he's trying that. And then the war broke out between Israel and Gaza. And then they all declared war on him. Guess what? You are not going to have him as an ally anymore. That's a guy who was actually sharing his platform with people like Mohammed Hijab in an effort to build bridges. And they were loving him for a little while. And then it all broke down. And now you got the same thing. I guarantee his thought on going on there was pretty much the same thing that he wanted to convey to Richard Dawkins. Like, hey, you need to think a little more deeply about this stuff because there's some things here that you're kind of missing, and you're missing the significance, and you got superficial thinking on a lot of these issues. Why don't you try and have some deeper thinking and so on? And like the big takeaway from Peterson's discussion with Dawkins is it's almost like they're speaking different languages. I mean, they're both speaking English, but it's like they're speaking completely different languages. They're interested in completely different things. They're focused on completely different things. And I could tell, I mean, if you just said it's a bunch of atheists who are supposedly attacking a Christian, you're probably going to get the aggressive, angry atheist, and he's going to be speaking a completely different language from them. And so anyway, I think the result will be very similar to his discussion with Richard Dawkins. But we'll see. We'll see. Anyone check it out?
No, I didn't check it out. I don't even know what they're talking about.
Let's see. I'm looking for anyone who says they've seen it. Maple syrup is based. Adolescent atheists.
I don't even like maple syrup.
Jordan Peterson should have stayed behind the Diddy line. Hey, I'm putting out a bounty system right now. There's a bounty system right now. Because I don't know who's going on Jubilee or in what circumstances anyone's going on Jubilee or how any of that stuff works. Anyone out there, you can pass the word around. Anyone, Christian, atheist, whoever, who goes on Jubilee, and you're the guy in the middle, surrounded by everyone else. If you go on Jubilee and you sit down in that chair and you look around and you go, surrounded by all these guys looking at me, now I know what Muhammad must have felt like when he was surrounded by the men of Al-Zut. That's all you have to say. $1,000. I'll give you $1,000 if anyone does that. It's easy, right? Take you a couple of seconds. You're already going to be there. No one's going to know what you're talking about, but I'll know what you're talking about. And AP will match it. So that'll be $2,000 for anyone. Keep in mind, it's got to make it into the cut. So you need to insist that it's in the cut. That would be awesome. Oh, wait. People saying he cooked him. You're talking about, I think they're talking about God Logic cooking that dude. Interesting. Should be interesting. Well, we got cool stuff to come up. Stay behind the Diddy line. That is true, everyone. Stay behind the Diddy line. Hey, we need to come up with a version of Jubilee, but we'll call it the Al-Zut show, right?
Yeah.
Like everyone's surrounding you. That's pretty funny. Let's take these first couple of super. So anyway, guys, we'll be checking out some of that at some point. I'll probably watch some of it tonight. If I get a chance. Although I think I'm gonna record my Andrew Wilson video in the morning. AP. Really? So I'm gonna have to get all that material. Oh yeah, I need to ask you a couple things right after the show's done.
Okay.
No,
all
mainly
right.
I don't know what sources he's using for some of his claims because he wasn't citing sources.
He doesn't use sources.
Yeah, so I'm wondering where he's getting stuff and if a couple things are accurate and
out of his mind. That's what he said when he was asked about sources. He said, "I don't need sources. I don't need sources.
Yeah,
I'm presenting my own argument. It's my own logic."
Yeah, he's just saying logic. But anyway, so yeah, that and wanted to ask you something about you quoted a church father and stuff. So anyway. Yeah. I'm going to be responding. I'm going to call it something like how Andrew Wilson is, I don't know, supporting, something like that. A nuclear antichrist, because I'm just using his logic. I'm using his logic, but he hasn't thought through it enough. And so he's going to find out his logic actually means that he's supporting a nuclear antichrist. And so that should be fun. Anyway, that should be up in the morning. Let's see. Take these first couple super chats and we'll jump into this video. Alex O'Connor, John Lennox, interesting stuff. They start talking about the God of the gaps, and whether this is all God of the gaps reasoning and stuff like that, saying, hey, DNA, all this stuff points to God. Talk about that for a little while. Then they talk about evolution, and does evolution undermine what human beings are, according to Christianity? And then they actually start talking about atheism a little bit, and Alex makes this interesting admission where he says, yep, definitely does seem to be something different going on right now with Christianity as far as everything. And that's something a lot of people have been noticing. So fun times. Take these first couple super chats. We'll jump into that video. That is a super sticker. Thank you, Ida. Off topic, Zakir Naik impression, please, Dr. Wood. I've never practiced it. So anyway, it's not going to be very good. But yeah, he's just like, brother, make a good point. That's number 15. What's number 23? But yeah, other people can do it. Like Christian Prince does a spot on one. I could probably do it if I practice. Fun little note, but we never have it recorded. Nabil did the best all-time Zakir Naik impression, but it was something he wouldn't do on camera or something like that. He did a perfect Zakir Naik impression. Certain things I wish I had, is all the things I wish I had recorded. I wish I had that recorded. And something that people don't know, Nabil could freestyle rap. But it's something he wouldn't do on camera. But I mean, I wish I used to beatbox and he would freestyle rap just about stuff that was going on. I wish I had that. So let's see.
Yeah, you know what I would do if I was a big scumbag. The funny thing is, about 2 weeks ago, the Whatever podcast actually responded to me because I called them out, or I called out their guests.
Which podcast?
The Whatever podcast.
Wait, what? Isn't that a big podcast?
Yeah. But so the guy from the Whatever podcast responded to me on Twitter saying, because I said something like how to be a traditional Christian, go on a talk show and sit with OnlyFans models to talk about sex for hours. Mm-hmm. And then he responded to me from the Whatever podcast account and said, how to bear false witness as a Christian. Only one of these women do OnlyFans. Would it not talk about sex for hours or even for 5 minutes? Maybe if you actually watched the show, you would know this instead of just making up lies. And I said, your show is built on inviting models, putting their breasts on the thumbnail, and putting out low-effort content about body counts and similar self-absorbed perversities. No self-respecting person sits down and watches it. And then they didn't respond anymore. The funny thing is, if I wanted to milk this, I would totally sit down and now make a whole video response to the Whatever podcast.
Yeah, you should. You should definitely milk that, but not in the way Muhammad was milking the men of El.
Yeah.
You can use that for anything, man. You can use that for anything.
No, the funny thing is that the profile picture of their podcast, the whole channel picture of their podcast, is a blow-up doll.
Oh, that's good. Hey, you know what's funny? I actually came up with an idea for the reverse, because who was that? Was that me and you when we had was that me and you, or no? I think that was me, Jai. So it was me and Jai, but then there was DOC, Hatun, and Mary Harp all on there at the same time. And people commented and they said, hey, this is the first time like women actually outnumber men on one of these shows. And a bunch of people pointed that out, because that's pretty much a wrecking crew squad right there. Mary Harp, DOC, and Hatun, right? That's like the Delta Force of ladies in apologetics dealing with Islam. I was thinking, would it be, I actually suggested this to them afterwards. I said, What if we had like 4 of you ladies who wreck Islam and you do a show, but we have all these guys around with their shirts off and they're all like the Chippendales wearing the bow tie guy and they're like idiots, and you just humiliate them and make them look stupid the entire time? It'd be like the reverse, right? Because that's the idea, is that we'll get some guys on there and ha ha ha, look at these dumb girls, and all they are is dumb girls with boobs and stuff, right?
Look at the idiots. Bimbos.
Yeah. So anyway, it would be fun. You could actually have the complete reversal of that situation. Have a few ladies on there who are absolutely crushing all the guys, and a bunch of guys showing off their pecs, and that's it.
That'd be funny.
And we'll call it the Ever What podcast.
That'd be good. Let's do it.
Let's see. RKZ Edit says, found Momo in the Bible in church today, Jeremiah 3:2. It says, lift up your eyes to the bare heights and see, where have you not been ravished? By the waysides you have sat awaiting lovers like an Arab in the wilderness. You have polluted the land with your vile whoredom. That does sound like Muhammad. That does sound like Muhammad and his encounter with the men of Al-Zut. That video's almost at 600,000. Once it hits 1 million, I'm going to release the next video in this series. So we got the men of Al-Zut. What's the next one going to be? Is it going to be Muhammad cross-dressing? Is it going to be what Muhammad did in his aunt's grave, or to his aunt in his aunt's grave? Anyway, yep. Get ready, people of the world. AP looking like Vlad Teeps. Oh, no, that's not how you pronounce it. Teepish. It's spelled Teeps. I'm going to say it Teeps.
It's literally Tippish.
Okay, if you want to pronounce it differently, spell it.
You mean correctly?
Yeah, just put an H on the end of there. Wait, he said from Castlevania. Hang on, what? From Castlevania? The video game? That wasn't Vlad. Oh, was that Vlad in Castlevania? I don't remember, man. Castlevania was a game back in the day. Please do a reaction to the Muslim... Oh, hang on. We got confirmation from Mike Jones, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, we've heard from Mike Jones.
Who?
Huh?
Who?
Hang on.
You're supposed to say Mike Jones, man.
Mike Jones.
Too late.
1 second. Got to respond to him real quick. Plus we have different audiences. All right. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're on. Think we're on for Mike Jones. For Tuesday, and then he's going to be covering more of it on Wednesday. That was his concern, because he's already scheduled to go to talk about some of it with someone else on Wednesday. I told him it's a long show, so shouldn't be any problem.
Dude, it's pronounced Wednesday.
It's Wednesday. I'm sitting here giving you lessons on spelling. You're Turkish, my goodness. Please do a reaction to the Muslim man on Reasoned admitting everything you guys have been saying. Name is Shock Video. Man declares Islam will take over.
Mandim.
You want to look that up?
No.
Reasoned, Muslim man on Reasoned admitting everything you guys have been saying. Really? Did he admit that Muhammad got banged by the men of Al-Zut? You said he agreed to everything. Let's see. D. What an AP. Due to atheism, what you did to Islam. We shall.
No.
Atheism will be humiliated.
Leave atheism alone.
I will never cook for Yalda Beoth. Not sure what that is. Chad Winger, the ultimate Dawa destroyer. D. Would I challenge you to the bare knuckle mubahala? You're finished. All my mubahalas are bare knuckle. Love the work you two do. Thought-provoking and hilarious. That's what we do. Dr. Shabir Ali has a channel. I know that. What's your point? What about Shabir? Almost forgot you guys were streaming tonight. Was wasting time watching a debate on whether baptism gives salvation. I'd much rather see a debate on whether Sunday best is required for salvation. Go. Yes, it is. AP's not going to debate that. Oh, the mighty Al-Zut, you see.
Exactly.
Dawood converted Nabil and Apostle Prophet to Christ. No, did neither. Video game controller punches and kicks in between the words. What is this? Oh, I was sitting there reading like a comment and not understanding it. That was a super sticker. Hey, thank you, Isak Girl for life. All right. Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff, man. All right. Ready to check out some of this video?
Yes.
So right before this, what we're about to watch, that's where they were having the discussion about the word, that in the Bible, the word is at the beginning. Everything is created through the word. And Lennox was pointing out how like everything in the universe is like the language of mathematics. And then there's the language of DNA and so on. And then so I think I have a few seconds of that. And then Alex brings up the question of whether this is God of the gaps reasoning. So God of the gaps basically is like where you say, I don't understand this, therefore God. There's a gap in my knowledge, a gap in my understanding, and I'm just going to say, okay, I don't get this. This makes no sense, or I don't know what to do about this, therefore God. And we'll see how. What are you grinning at?
I'm grinning at the bird is the word. Just
Hey, that's what's funny, because there's Sajid. Let me tell you what a word is. Here's what a word is. A word. So he's talking about a word, and what a word. And if I say that's my word, and word is bond, and all this stuff, right? So he's explaining what a word is. It is funny that then you have this discussion of the word between Alex O'Connor and John Lennox. But yeah, it'd be good to combine those with cuts to, but everybody's heard about the bird, the bird of the word. But by the way, isn't it just so different? You got Alex O'Connor. And by the way, they're going to be talking about the word here. Matter of fact, now that I think about it, I think I include that. They keep going about the word, and Alex has objections, but whether Lennox is kind of equivocating or equating different uses of the word word. But just compare that to like Sajid's discussion of word. It's like, you know, you've got an atheist and a Christian. Well, he's not an atheist, an agnostic and a Christian. They're having a discussion about the word, and then compare that with Sajid, which is like the dumbest, most idiotic nonsense in the world. Weird stuff, man. Dawa makes everything dumber. It just does. All right, everyone. Let's check some of this out. It's weird, guys, because I want to say, lots of times I usually will not watch something that's an hour and a half or 2 hours long or something like that, unless we're doing it for this, and we want to, hey, if I'm going to be watching it, we might as well watch it as a group and react to it and so on. And then when I do watch one of these hour and a half, 2 hour shows, it's like, okay, there are a couple of interesting points in there. So far, what I've been watching in this one, it's like all interesting stuff. That's just rare. It's just rare we're watching, and it's all interesting. But let's go. They're going to be talking about again, God of the Gap stuff. Then whether evolution would be a problem for what we are, what human beings are according to Christianity. Let's check this out. Don't be scared.
We are left to have the interest, fascination, and enjoyment of finding out a great deal about the world ourselves. But the Bible does make this steering comment that says it's a word-based universe. And what I say is that science has come up for the evidence for that.
Just in case anyone doesn't get the context there, because I kind of clipped it at an awkward spot where he's just finishing up something he said. But when he's talking about, so God has left us basically to do science, he points out that in Genesis in Genesis 1, in Genesis, so you have the creation account and so on, but then God has man name all the animals. And so the implication for him, he said, that's taxonomy, classifying things. The implication is that God isn't doing everything for us. God is telling us to figure things out. And so hence the scientific enterprise continues and so on. Then he goes into the discussion of the word. All right.
That's my big problem with the naturalistic worldview. There's no believable generator of word-like information that any of us know about. It always is associated in our experience, at least, with a human intelligence.
Well, what jumps out at me from what you're saying, just at the end there, you say word-like information. And I think that this let's say this term, word,
yes,
I want to be careful not to use it too promiscuously, because there's the words that I'm using to speak in the language that I'm using, and then there's the so-called language of DNA.
Are you sitting here thinking bird is a word?
No.
Okay, good. You're still grinning, though. And the last time you were grinning,
I didn't know that.
You said, I was thinking about bird as a word. What?
No, it's describing it as using a word promiscuously is kind of
okay, all right. I caught that. Yeah. I caught that, too. I was like...
It's an interesting way to describe it.
Yes. Everyone's going around banging this word. What's what? Why would you do that? Anyway.
Which, as far as I understand, is something of an analogy. I mean, we're not talking about words in the sense that I would use words to construct a linguistic sentence, but it might sort of work in a similar way, information being put together in such a way as to produce something larger than the sum of its parts. You've also then got the word that God speaks in Genesis, which is when he says, "Let there be light," which reads to me like a pronouncement of the divine. And then, of course, you've got Jesus being the Logos,
yes,
which is usually translated as the Word.
Yes.
But if I were to equivocate the Logos of John's prologue with Genesis chapter 1, then I'm thinking how that would read to me. When God says, "Let there be light," he sort of does it through Jesus, which is in keeping with the vision of creation in John 1.
Uh-huh.
But I'm wondering exactly...
We both said the same reaction. Uh-huh. Everyone catch it? So, guys, so in Genesis 1, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth and so on. But you have God mentioned, you have the Spirit mentioned, but it's God says. And then so in John 1, says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. But then it's all things were created through the Word. And so the idea is that the Word that God is speaking, that is organizing everything, is actually a person. And you're being informed of this in John 1 and so on. So anyway, Alex just tied that together. He goes, well, I guess that would fit with John 1. John Lennox, mm-hmm. So anyway.
Go ahead.
Wizard.
How you, I don't want to say equivocate, but how exactly you...
I think you mean equate.
Equate.
There we go.
Yes.
Equalize, whatever you like.
Yeah. Equivocate would be using the same word in an argument, but changing the definition. It's a logical fallacy. That's not what's... Yeah, so equate would be better there.
This logos of John 1 with Genesis 1. I mean, literally speaking.
Well, I used the word resonate.
Uh-huh.
And I certainly didn't use the word literal, which is a very dangerous word in my view. Yeah. That's one that's used promiscuously, if ever there was one.
He said promiscuously. He used it. Oh, so, dude, that was...
This was a very, very nicely put reference of the very thing that Alex just said. He brought it back in such a beautiful way by referring to the word literally as a word that is promiscuously used, which is very popularly known to be just used whenever somebody wants to use a filler nowadays. It's very, very cool.
Yeah. It was also, that response was so perfect. It's easy to miss. It's easy to miss how perfect that response was. Cause Alex goes on. So Alex talks for, I don't know, minute and a half or whatever, basically explaining, hey, you're talking about DNA and it's word-like. It's word-like in the sense that it's sets of instructions and it's coded and you actually write it out as letters, as a sequence of letters and so on. And then it gets translated to actually make proteins and so on. So it's word-like, but it's not exactly like words that we're familiar with. And if you talk about God speaking and then Jesus is the word, it's like, okay, what's going on here? You can't equivocate here. And he said, you wouldn't equate them, right? In other words, you wouldn't say that the way I'm using word here is the same as I'm using word over there. And so Alex raises this as an objection. And then Lennox says, well, I didn't say literally a word. I didn't say literally a word for all this, for DNA or something like this. And he goes, I would use the word resonates. These things resonate. That's a much better description of how he's using these terms. This reminiscent. So the language of DNA is reminiscent of human language and so on, something like that. Or all these things kind of resonate. Anyway, good little response. And then he brought it back to promiscuous there. Matter of fact, let me play it again.
I just love how he uses language and how the way he is a speaker, the way he conveys this. It was a very, very simple but very smart response. I love it.
Yeah, I'm gonna play what he said again, and then we do have. I have to go through a couple of the super chats because you got one about the promiscuous thing. Hey?
With Genesis 1, I mean, literally speaking.
Well, I used the word.
Did you catch that? Literally speaking. It doesn't make sense. Literally speaking, and he said, "I'm not using it."
Resonate. And I certainly didn't use the word literal, which is a very dangerous word in my view. That's one that's used promiscuously, if ever there was one.
So he just, Alex, of course, we're happy that Alex has been bringing up important points to respond to and so on. But yeah, he just, Lennox just shut all that down real quick. That's not what I said. I would strongly, anyway, I want to get to Christian Gadfly's comment. I would strongly suggest you guys to watch some of Jonathan. How do you say that last name, AP? Peugeot's video. That's what it looks like. He's really good with laying out the symbolism in the Bible, especially Genesis and the typology of Christ. Yeah, people have been recommending that for years. I've just never actually gotten around to watching.
I could actually invite him for a conversation.
Do that, dude. Pick an interesting topic. I like hearing from smart people who think outside the box on a lot of these things.
He follows me. I just want to brag about that quickly. But I could totally do that.
Yep. We'll do that. We should get him on for something. Let's see. That's why I don't want to ask if the next conversation is going to be about dots and commas in colorful books. Wait, what's this? That's why I don't want to ask if the next conversation is going to be about colorful books. What is this, AP? Do you know what this is about?
Huh? I don't know. It's going to be dots and commas in colorful books. I don't know, man. Just because I say Ida is based, that doesn't mean I understand everything she says.
Oh, no. I think Ida's talking about Sajid, because we're making fun of Sajid. Yeah, because first Sajid was talking about let me explain. So he's responding to the Islamic dilemma, and he's breaking down. This is hadith. A hadith is, but he's talking like he's talking on Sesame Street or something like that. But then he's like regress, and the video we just went through, it's like, this is what a word is. Think about what a word is and stuff. And so, I think Ida's saying, it's going to be, let me tell you about punctuation, and here's what a comma is, and coloring book or something. Here you have from Christian Gadfly, who says, I also giggled at promiscuous AP. We are children. Yes, you guys have have seriously childish minds.
We are all children of God.
He admitted, so this is going back to the guy who admitted, Muslim who admitted what we've been saying. He admitted Western media complicity. Islam is not a religion of peace, and that's a myth from Westerners, etc. That's pretty good. Anyway, I screenshotted what you said. I'll check it out. Did you know John Lennox is fluent in German? Another excellent resource, albeit in German, is Werner Gitt. Am Anfang war die Information. Yeah. In the beginning was information. You don't know anything about that?
Nope.
It is interesting. He's fluent in German. You guys should do a discussion, but in German, if you can even remember German. What?
Natürlich.
All right, back to this. Ja, wunderbar.
Within computer science and biology, nowadays people use that kind of terminology. They use computer language in biology, and they use ordinary language about words in computer science because there's a very intimate relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, I'll back that up because I didn't want to interrupt him that quickly, but
back that up.
Yeah, so I was a double major in biology and philosophy. Then I just focused on philosophy, and then did all my work in philosophy, but I was still I wasn't interested in biology in general. I was interested in DNA because it's coded information. So I thought, hey, maybe I should get a master's degree so I can actually study that because I wanted to study it. And so I looked up, and anyway, you get a degree in bioinformatics. It's a study of biological information contained in DNA. And when I looked up what the MA program or MS program, Master of Sciences program was in bioinformatics, your first couple of courses are all computer science. And it's you have to learn computer science in order to understand what's going on in DNA. I'm sitting there thinking, do you guys not, I mean, how do some of you atheists not like see this, right? In order to understand what's going on in DNA with the coded information, understand computer coding first to get your mind around it. That's wild stuff to me. Anyway, that's what Lennox is pointing out right here, that that's the closest thing you have to it. Hang on, back
You
this
didn't
up.
use the word literal, which is a very dangerous word in my view.
Yeah.
That's one that's used promiscuously, if ever there was one. Within computer science and biology, nowadays people use that kind of terminology. They use computer language in biology, and they use ordinary language about words in computer science because there's a very intimate relationship.
Gabriel here says, as someone with a computer science degree, the connection is pretty clear. And how, in the name of common sense, atheists can't see this? Hey, the closest parallel you have to coded information is computer coding. What just happened?
In that, I think what many biologists say to me, and in reading their material, that it's word-like in the sense that the DNA letters code for the amino acids which code for.
Yes.
And that's the word, which code for the proteins, which are the building blocks of life. So if you like to say it's an analogy, but it's an extremely powerful analogy because at the very base level, you're communicating information. Now, this is a difficult area.
Yes.
I'm very well aware that if you ask me, what do you mean by information? It's like so many things. We don't exactly know how to define it.
Yeah.
It's like Augustine said about time. Everybody knows what it is until they're asked to define it.
Yes.
It's one of those...
You'll get that. It's a famous quote by Augustine.
He was based.
I know what time is unless you ask me to define it. And what he means by that is, how do you define time? Like if you were to put it, and the thing is, even if you look up what time is or you try to make a definition, you end up using time words, which you'll say, oh, a temporal success. You can't say temporal if a person doesn't know what time is, right? So how do you explain it to someone who didn't actually know what it is? So anyway.
Things, but...
1 second. Moody says, David, I'm an atheist. I'm listening, but not convinced of Logos idea has anything to do with a good God, let alone a creator. You could have some other idea. You could the Logos could be something else, because you would not have to say this is a good God or a creator God. because you had the concept of a logos before that. Heraclitus, a pre-Socratic. No, was he pre? Yeah, he's pre-Socratic. But he was obsessed with the idea of the logos. He's obviously not thinking of anything like the God of Christianity and so on. So you could. The point is, it fits really well. One, it fits really well with the Christian concept of God. Two, the logos, as far as like information, like everything around you is obeying language. It's all following mathematical language. And then in DNA and so on, you have like actual coded information. The point is there's information everywhere. And then you have in the Bible that everything is being upheld by the word. So anyway, that shouldn't be enough to make you go, oh my goodness, Christianity is true or something like that. But the point is it fits really, really well. But also, if you're a naturalist, it doesn't fit well at all, right? Like that should be shocking to people. Like if there's just some mindless source behind the universe or something like that, and everything ends up as language and coded information, that should be absolutely mind-boggling. So let me put it this way: if you have two hypotheses, Christian theism and naturalism, and you didn't know that everything around you is obeying language, and that packed into all of your cells is massive amounts of coded information, which hypothesis would that be more surprising on? Well, if I said, hey, if Christianity is true, is it surprising that language is somehow upholding everything? No, I mean, that's exactly what the Bible says. If naturalism is true, would that be surprising? Yeah, really, really, really surprising. So what you'd say, as far as confirmation theory, is the evidence favors one hypothesis over the other. Here I would say that favors Christian theism massively over naturalism. Now, what you could say is, but there are other hypotheses that would also fit with not just Christianity. And I would agree to that. But it is interesting that you have this idea, seems to be really, really built into Christianity about the logos, and we just keep finding more and more and more.
It's also you made it you make it about it, but I think that, as far as I remember the context of this conversation that John Lennox is having with Alex O'Connor, the point of the conversation was not necessarily about arriving at God using this argument, right? It was rather about about whether religion, or more specifically Christianity, is at conflict with science or not. And I think, and John Lennox is very well actually making the point that science is not at all at conflict, but rather goes with religion or with Christianity, using this here. So he's not really using this as an argument for the Creator God, but rather just saying that there is a foundation, there is a basis. It goes with religion. It goes with science. So there is no problem.
Yeah. So along those lines, if you didn't want to say, hey, this proves this or that, because I wouldn't say this proves Christianity true or something like that. But along the lines of what AP was saying, right, it fits really well. And all this stuff shouldn't be fitting really well if the atheists were correct and all the evidence supports them, and religion is all just a bunch of idiotic nonsense and so on. There shouldn't be so much stuff that fits really, really well with our view and doesn't fit with the atheist view at all. But there is. Hey, Paul says, Jay Dyer name dropped you in his Hodge Twins episode.
I don't think he actually named me. I think
no,
he just
me, weirdo, not you, me. He said it to me.
Oh, you?
Yeah.
Really?
What did he name drop me for? He's like, in this, what's he call me? And this heretic David Wood. Was it like that, or was it like, hey, David Wood said this about Islam? What was it?
I'm going to check it right now.
I know that he referenced
me. I know he talked about me, but he didn't say my name. But I don't know what he said about you.
The filthy ex-Muslim whose name shall not be mentioned because he's so weak and pathetic.
I kind of want to review the thing. I kind of want to review the debate between him and Not So Erudite, because
what was that?
I see the responses to it, and I also saw a few parts of it, and it looks like an interesting thing to review. And
wait, what is it?
Like, so on the Whatever podcast, where he had a debate one-on-one with the other streamer called Not So Erudite, and Jay Dyer.
Is that a guy or a girl?
Girl, and apparently it wasn't very good, but it was apparently a very, very interesting show.
Oh.
So I might want to go through that sometime.
Hey, Paul says, he said he doesn't like you, but he said you have a very good argument against Islam. That's funny.
Oh, that's funny. I'm going to check it out now.
Someone doesn't like me. Oh no. What am I going to do? Funny. Hey, Jay Dyer, if you don't like me now, keep mouthing off to AP and other people I know. And you're going to like me way less, buddy. Because everyone will start calling you Gay Liar instead of Jay Dyer.
Wait a minute, man.
What?
I didn't know this, but the episode that he was just on with those dumb twins, Jay Dyer.
Yeah.
It seems that there is some really, really interesting stuff to review there, especially considering. So the title of the episode is "Islam and Judaism have one thing in common: they hate Christ." First off, I definitely have something to say about that, because that would be very interesting to watch.
Wait,
Then,
wait, they say Islam hates Christ? Like their main argument is we love Jesus.
And then I look at the timestamps here. One of the timestamps says Palestine was a Christian nation.
We got to go through that, man. We're gonna have to go through some of that. Oh boy. Okay,
man. I think we have to review this whole thing, because it looks like, I know that those twins like put out some really, really idiotic content, but I really wonder what
it's weird. It's weird. It's weird. It's weird because I used to like them just because they're comedians. They're comedians, and so they're just funny. And I just watch one of their clips, and the guys would be just describing something or reviewing some video clip, but the guys are hilarious. And the fact that they're like twins and like finishing each other's sentences and stuff like that, they were hilarious. Then they jumped on the "we will destroy all Jews" bandwagon. And based on the sound of what you just said, sounds like they absorbed some of the dumbest talking points that there are. What is this? Very rude. Very rude. Someone said, AP looks like a retired or retarded metal singer. Actually, I see it. You do look like a metal singer from the 80s who's gone gray. David, I'm a software engineer. I read Signature in the Cell, Meyer, around 10 years ago.
Oh.
What?
Hey, I just quickly listened to it. He says, he talks about how Islam is different. He says, I'm not a huge fan of David Wood, but he actually hit me in the past, because in one of his videos he makes a very good point, and he says that in the Quran it actually says that the Jews had their religion, the Christians had their religion, and now the Arabs have their religion. So he actually references a point that you made as good. That's pretty good.
Hey, Jay. We know you're watching this because you're obsessed with what anyone says about you ever. But Jay, next time you're talking to one of these guys and you mention me, you name drop me, I want you to say, and the heretic David Wood. That heretic David Wood. I don't like him because he's a heretic, but he's got a good point on this. That is the appropriate way to talk to me. I mean, about me. So before...
excuse me, White Trash Panda said those dumb twins, the Hodge twins, are very based. I said they're dumb. I didn't say they are not based. Now, the thing is, I don't know much about them. But if you are comedians, it's often a very good idea to just stick to whatever you do to be funny. It is often not a very good result if you are famous for like being stupidly funny, and then you suddenly start going into political commentary. It's often not a good idea. It often leads to very, very disastrous results. Of course, there are exceptions.
No, it works. I think it's good if you got a background in comedy. Because I mean, look, it works for people, right? Like Joe Rogan and stuff like that. He was a comedian.
But here's the thing. I'm not saying it doesn't work.
You just said don't ever do it if you have a background in comedy. Under no circumstances should you ever do a podcast.
Well, I mean,
and I'm saying
you could also
that's
become
false.
a prostitute. That also works. But you should.
That works.
That's the point, you know. So,
dude, they got one of the biggest shows there are. So you're saying don't do this. This would not work. No, look. Having a background in comedy will probably really, really help you do interviews because it makes them entertaining. Just don't be evil. Don't be evil. That's my problem when you become evil. So yeah.
So it's one thing to be funny and to then be, to entertain people and all that, but to then try and turn into actual political commentators and put out really, really idiotic content and take on the responsibility to pollute society with very stupid and very wrong ideas. It's just, I understand if you do it because it's good for you, it's good for your business and your money and your fame and all that. But these two guys now put out really, really, really bad content in terms of misinforming.
They've been getting worse. Very,
very, very, very, very rapidly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that would be the main thing. If you are a funny person and you can use that to get a popular show, just make sure you're not spreading idiotic nonsense.
Yeah.
And they are spreading idiotic nonsense, and that's bad. HB said, David, I am a software engineer. I read Signature in the Cell. That's Meyer's book. That's about it. It's cool. He goes through like the discovery of DNA, like in tons of detail about how they figured it out and stuff like that. Around 10 years ago, when I just started following Christ, made instant sense. Yes. Good stuff. The size of organic molecular shape space is on the order of 10 to the 60th power, all done to create 300,000 genera on the order of just 4 times 10 to the 9th years. No? I don't know what you're saying here, Alyosha, with your no and the eyes there. What are you saying? Wust kind of nerd says Wednesday and Augustine. Pretty much everyone in every philosophy department on the planet says Augustine. No, I say Augustine. You didn't even spell what right. You said Wust. Telling me. What is time? Oh, Antichrist hater. What is time? Wait and you'll find out. Pretty scary. Yeah, moody materialism does not account for information. So who's that responding to? Moody. Where'd the moody comment go, man? How did I lose it? Okay, just going to have to move on. Let's see. No, the building of life is the meeting of Momo with Al-Zutz. Sorry, it's really late here. My brain is acting funny. Don't worry, Ida. You can work the story of Muhammad and the Al-Zutz into anything as far as I'm concerned. Okay, atheists, pray to IT help desk as they are your higher power, right? Have you tried switching it on? It's funny, people are arguing in the chat. Post-reductionist Christianity, A Way Out of the Meaning Crisis, a very edifying and relevant book about everything you guys are talking about. AP, you should check that out.
What is it called?
You're interested in the issue of meaning and so on. Someone's saying this is a good book. Post-reductionist Christianity, A Way Out of the Meaning Crisis. I'm also interested in that. The meaning crisis. That's what I think it's in this discussion where they get to that a lot of the younger generation being more open to religion than people thought, because they thought they're all going to become more atheistic, and they're not. A lot of it has more to do with with issues of meaning than it does of like, here's the scientific proof for this or that.
Oh, this is Jonathan Pajot. Okay. No, it's not. Wait. It's Jean-Philippe Marcoux. Who is this? I don't know.
You thought that was Jonathan Pajot. AP thinks everyone with a stupid name is the same
no,
person.
it's because he had a discussion with the author. Okay, I see. I see. Interesting.
Yeah, that should be interesting. Daniel Green says, science supports creation theory more over time. Yeah, that's true. It's like you would think that over time you're going to have less evidence of design, and that's false. Over time you have more evidence of design. As I mentioned in the last live stream where we were talking about this, like they used to think that cells in your body were little blobs of protoplasm. They needed it to be this little simple thing because you needed simple things that are just kind of put together as more complicated things. You needed to start off with the simple things and so on. And then you find out, of course, they're like little cities. The cells in your body are like little cities. And that even the simplest cells are like little cities. They're not these little simple, easy things. And so as time goes on, you find more and more and more problems for the naturalistic view. And yet some of you silly atheists are still clinging to that. No, but I was told I was smart if I just mindlessly accept this view. You guys should watch Jordan Peterson versus 20 Atheists. Where have you been, Ragnar? That's how we started off the show. You must have jumped in late.
There was a Jordan Peterson Jubilee?
Wait a minute. Is Ragnar saying that Jordan Peterson was on Jubilee?
What?
Yeah, we already talked about this. You came in right after we discussed this, Ragnar. Yeah, and just so you know, we're going to be going through some of that on Tuesday with Inspiring Philosophy. So we're going to check some of that out. So anyway, yeah, you guys should watch Jordan Peterson versus 20 Atheists. If you haven't, video dropped today on Jubilee. They also changed title from One Christian versus, yeah, we talked about all that. That's interesting stuff.
Wait, Jordan Peterson was on Jubilee? Interesting.
If John Lennox keeps saying promiscuous, he may get a call from the Whatever podcast for a guest appearance. For our John Lennox book, 2084 in the AI Revolution. Sorry, I'm thinking about. I was reading this and I was thinking, why didn't they get John Lennox on Jubilee? He'd be one of my top picks. Let's see, call from Whatever podcast for a guest appearance. Yeah, if he keeps talking about promiscuous. Let's see. Hey, David, I don't know jack about philosophy, but I just downloaded your dissertation. How difficult will it be for me to get through? Any tips, advice? Oh, hey, AP. Hello. I mean, my dissertation's on the Bayesian argument from evil. It's like the most sophisticated version of the argument. Here's the thing. I do explain everything, though. In other words, I have an entire chapter going through Bayesian reasoning just because the argument uses Bayesian reasoning. So if you're reading it carefully, you could pick up everything. However, if you just wanted a response to the problem of evil, there are more relevant and popular. This is like, I mean, the Bayesian argument from evil, that's like a kind of specialist type thing. It's philosophers who are discussing that. But anyway, that's up to you. Read some of it, see what happens.
The However podcast.
Let's see. Alyosha, just that there is no possible way to get that done in the time given. Oh, so that's, yeah, I asked Alyosha what you were saying. Yeah, so I'm guessing you're saying something along the lines of, matter of fact, this was also in Signature in the Cell. When you actually do the math, you can actually calculate. So you have lots of atheists who think, okay, so yeah, life forming on its own, yeah, it's improbable, but given enough time and we have a really big universe, all kinds of things are possible, so why not? Well, turns out it's way more complicated than you think. And the size of the universe and having billions of years actually doesn't help you at all. So you can actually do the math. And Stephen Meyer does this in Signature in the Cell. But basically you can take the entire number of seconds since the Big Bang. So that's all the time you have. The number of seconds since the Big Bang. You can you multiply that by the number of particles in the entire universe. It's 10 to the 80th power. 10 to the 80th power particles in the entire universe. And then you say, okay, we have an upper limit at how fast these particles can be interacting. It would be the speed of light. So you take 10 to the 80th particles times and 10 to the 80th particles, say that they're all interacting at the speed of light for the entire duration of the universe. You have the number of seconds, and that's sort of that's your total possible number of particle interactions. You can't have more particle interactions than that. That is the total number of particle interactions that you could have since the Big Bang. So that gives you a number. Then you can actually calculate the odds of a protein forming by chance, right? So proteins don't think of protein as like drinking a protein shake. Proteins are all the little parts in your cells that are doing all the work.
It
right?
actually is.
Yeah. Proteins are the little parts of your cells that are doing all the work. The simplest known life, I forget, I think it's like 250 or something like that. The simplest known life, something like 250 proteins for the simplest known life. Again, that is probably not the correct number. It's something in that ballpark. Then they've done something called knockout experiments where, okay, this is the simplest life we actually have. Are there things in that we could actually take out and it would still work as a cell? So then you start getting to like the simplest possible life as far as you know it. You can do all that, all right? So you need a couple of hundred proteins for the simplest life that we could consider life. Here's the thing. When you calculate the odds of a medium length protein forming by chance, you get a huge number. And guess what? The number of particle interactions, possible particle interactions since the Big Bang, you're not even close to getting one medium length protein by chance. In other words, you're not getting it. You're not getting it. So every particle in the universe interacting at the speed of light for the entire duration of time that we have, you're not even close to getting one protein by chance. You need 250 of them around that for the simplest life the simplest cell that we could actually know would function as a cell. The point is, big universe and lots of time is not helping you. It's still ridiculously, insanely improbable.
Bigly.
Let's see. A couple more real quick. Do want to get back to this interview, though. The coolest thing is that the genetic code showed up with all the equipment it needed to read and replicate itself. Yeah, that's the other thing. So, guys, DNA is only part of it. You can have DNA. That's a set of instructions. Guess what? I can give you a book that has a set of instructions for building a computer. You still need other stuff you need something to read all those instructions and then to actually do the building. You need all kinds of things. And so, yeah, you don't just have DNA. You have all the parts that are reading it, translating it, assembling the amino acids into proteins and folding them and so on. Good stuff. But it all just happened. It's all just chance. So yes, that is correct, Beatrice. When Nabil greets you in heaven, he will do it with his Zakharnik impression, and in your new resurrected body, you may not be sociopathic. Oh, hi, AP. Yeah, that's cool.
Hello.
Someone told Muhammad to zut up, time to zut up or shut up. I'm screenshotting that. There's gonna the men of al zut. It's zut, but zut up or shut up is a good motto for them. Wouldn't that be that should be their motto? Like they surround Muhammad and what they turn to each other and one of them goes, "Time to zut up or shut up." Oh boy, these are fun times, man. Fun times. Can you imagine? No one knows this stuff, and then it gets put out there, and people find out about it. I asked Dr. Wood and AP a question in desperation this week. Your answers changed my life. I thank you with everything I have. I am now finding a church once again. Thank you. I have opened my heart.
I remember you. That's very good to hear. Very good to hear.
AP remembers you. That is good to hear.
Makes me very, very happy.
Yeah, see, all you people think, everyone out there thinks AP and David just don't do anything right. They're just losers and dress up as wizards and stuff like that. Yeah. But no,
which is largely true. Yeah,
sometimes make a difference. What do you think it would take to disprove God? That's here's the thing, Robert. I know we're doing super chats and stuff. We're going to check out a video. This is actually connected to the sort of overall topic of the video. What do you think it would take to disprove God? I actually think that's almost like it's different, but it's almost like saying, David, what do you think it would take to prove that you don't exist? Like, what evidence could someone give me that I don't exist? Keep in mind, no, you think you got no. I'm saying it's a different kind. It's not like normal things. Like, what evidence could you give me that this cup doesn't exist? Well, guess what? You could. There are other possibilities. Like I'm in the Matrix, or I'm dreaming right now, or something like that. There are other possibilities. If you gave me enough evidence that one of those other possibilities was the correct one, I would say, okay, you can actually prove to me that this cup doesn't exist. If you said you wanted to prove that I don't exist, the answer is nothing. There's nothing. There's no amount of evidence you could ever give me to convince me that I don't exist. You could get 1,000 PhD philosophers and 1,000 PhD scientists and 1,000 you could get every educated person in the entire universe talking to me. Matter of fact, you could get God talking to me and saying, David, you don't exist. It wouldn't convince me that I don't exist. Why? Well, the same reasoning that Descartes lays out in his Meditations on First Philosophy. If you're trying to convince me of something, then obviously I exist. And in other words, if I'm understanding you trying to convince me of something, obviously I am something that exists. I may not be what I think I am. I could be a brain in a vat or something like that. But at the very least, I am a thinking thing, and a thinking thing is something that exists. So my view would be that God is actually more similar. God is kind of in that category of something where, like, if you were talking about my own existence and convincing me that I don't exist, it's like me existing is necessary for me understanding what's going on, and therefore you couldn't give me any evidence because my existence is required for me even understanding anything that's going on. I think God is more along those lines. If God is necessary for there to be a universe, and even there, you wouldn't say that God is necessary for there to be a universe. That would be an evidential claim, because there could be other possibilities, and people have suggested other possibilities and so on. But you go kind of down the list of what, if you were trying to convince me with evidence, what needs to be in place for you to be able to convince me that, let's say, God doesn't exist. What evidence could you give? It would always be in my head, okay, in order for you to convince me of anything, we have a universe. That's used in the cosmological argument. We need a finely tuned universe. We wouldn't even exist if we didn't have a finely tuned universe. You need life. You not only need life, you need human consciousness. That's a specific kind of life. You need human reasoning ability, and so on. You need laws of logic. You need all kinds of things, but you start getting into like the conceptual realm, like moral laws and logical laws and mathematics and so on. And it's basically, in order to understand any of this stuff, any of the things we would understand, any of the arguments you'd be using, you have to show that there's some other any foundation you have that fits all this stuff is going to be an awful lot like God. So how would you use it to disprove God? You need to show that there's something else that is exactly like God that accounts for all these things. And that's just, I don't know, that's just weird. So yeah, how do you come up with another ground of possibility, another ground of logic, another ground of morality, another ground of just all the stuff they were talking about, mathematics and information and so on. Anything that could actually account for this that wouldn't be God would be so much like God. I don't know. I think if you really wanted, you'd have to hit me repeatedly in the head with a baseball bat until I lost my ability to think, and then I wouldn't understand arguments at all, and then maybe I would believe some argument that you gave me.
See, there you go. There's a solution.
You see, you can prove it. I actually want to figure out how to say what I just said, but in a clear, concise way. Because that's just the way it seemed to me for years, that talking about what could disprove God, because in philosophy you have this idea of falsifiability, right? If you're putting forward a claim, it should be falsifiable in some way. You should be able to, if your claim is meaningful, there should be a way to show that it's false if it is. So anyway, and philosophers have a problem if you put forward a claim that's not falsifiable. We'll put it this way: there are different kinds of, they're a different kind of claim. But here's the thing: it's like the claim that I exist, from my perspective, is a non-falsifiable claim. It's in a different category as far as what kind of claim it is. And my view is that, like, God's existence, even though you can make arguments for it and so on, it's so foundational to absolutely everything that once you see it, I don't know how you would make someone unsee it.
This reminds me of something funny, which is, I think yesterday or so, my wife, as she was sitting there, asked me to hand her this book, which is from Irenaeus Against Heresies. And she was looking something up, and she starts reading it. And for some reason, the translation, but especially the introduction of it, had this incredibly unnecessarily complicated language to it. It's like you open it up, and it's like, I don't even remember it. I probably have a photo of it right here, probably because I took a photo of it. But it's like an incredibly unnecessarily lengthy and complicated, huge sentence. And she's like, "Do you understand what this is saying?" And I'm looking at it, I'm reading it, and I'm, yeah, but this is incredibly long for some weird reason. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be nice if somebody went through all the books that were written in extremely overcomplicated ways and just shortened them all by reducing all those extremely overcomplicated sentences into very short sentences? And I thought to myself, hey, wait a minute, why don't I try that with AI? So I took a photo of it and asked ChatGPT to turn this incredibly lengthy and ridiculous sentence into a very short sentence without losing the meaning, and it actually did. Here's a sentence. "Inasmuch as certain men have set the truth aside and bring in lying words and vain genealogies, which, as the apostle says, minister questions rather than godly edifying, which is in faith, and by means of their craftily constructed plausibilities draw away the minds of the inexperienced and take them captive," in brackets, "I have felt constrained, my dear friend, to compose the following treatise in order to expose and counteract their machinations." What the hell? Why would you write this? So just like this, maybe you should also work on making all sentences shorter to make it accessible. That would be a very good endeavor.
That would be good. That would be very based.
Powerful.
God's existence is inevitable by geometric necessity, as finite space cannot sustain infinite division. Reality is built upon the tetrahedral octahedral lattice, where square root 2 plus square root 3, around 3.146, replacing pi. I wish I understood what you were saying, but I do not.
Something about lettuce.
On genetic mutations, even a typo can be devastating to a program and a massive headache to debug, and we're expected to accept compounded mutations. Yeah, matter of fact, I don't think I've ever... I'm trying to think if I've ever talked about this. Hang on. How many base pairs in human genome? 3 billion base pairs in human DNA. So that's basically the sequence of letters. 3 billion. Here's the thing. Many of you know, 2 of my 5 sons have had a genetic muscle disease. Their muscles don't work. They have extremely weak muscles. One of them died, and the other not doing so well because you eventually die from it if your muscles don't work. Anyway, that disease is caused by one letter being wrong in that entire sequence of 3 billion. So it's arranged. So you got it in your chromosomes and so on, but in your 23 chromosomes, you've got 3 billion letters. So you basically have, it's like having 23 books, 3 billion letters worth of information. One of those is wrong. One of them is off. That's a mutation. One of them is off, and boom, your muscles don't work anymore. So the point is that's a problem because mutations cause problems, right? When something goes wrong, and you get a letter wrong or something like that, it's not, now I got this awesome new feature. It's no, now you don't survive or something doesn't work. Let's see. Next time you debate Islam, you should show up on stage with a bunch of buff Indian dudes to intimidate your opponents. That'll be funny. Yeah. Matter of fact, just have the entire front row, a bunch of buff, dark-skinned Indian dudes. That would be classic. John Lennox speaks English, Russian, French, German, and Spanish. Bull.
Damn.
He only speaks leprechaun. As face-palming as it is, Jonathan Pajot was invited to chat with Mojab before. Do invite Pajot soon. God bless. Great to catch you live and ready for Pentecost. Yo, AP.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, he was in the conversation between Jordan Peterson and Mohammed Hijab.
Yeah, I saw the thumbnail. I've never watched it. I saw the thumbnail, so I know it exists, but I never watched it.
He actually did this he did something very cool in that conversation, which is so they were having a long conversation where Mohammed Hijab basically explained what Islam is and how Islam is awesome. And then he asked Jordan Peterson a question, and Jordan Peterson said, I don't know what you were asking me. And then Jonathan Pajot said, he's asking you if you're ready to convert to Islam. He figured out the whole thing, and he's like, he's just here to convert you, basically. So
that is, he's a
good guy.
Can you imagine? If I'm Mohammed Hijab, they'll be so overwhelmed they will convert to Islam. If I start babbling the Quran in Arabic, it will magically convert them. It's like delusional idiocy. Funny. All right, back to this.
One of the things I believe that has come out of physics, although that's debated up to today, is that information in the sense of we live in an information-based world is not derivable from physics and chemistry. Now, that to me is a massive block in the way of a materialistic explanation of life, mathematics, everything else. Because if information is not in the end material, then no material explanation is going to work for it. And it seems to me the death blow to materialism in the ultimate sense has been given by physics in talking about information not being reducible to physics and chemistry. So
you got that, guys. So you got matter, energy, and information.
These are a lot of the things that go around. You originally asked me,
yes,
was biology a threat to belief in God? It has been and is been used in that way. But if somebody comes to me who's not a biologist and not particularly interested in the details as I am, I want to say, well, okay, you believe in evolution. It means at least 5 different things, but let's assume you think there's a natural process that does this. One, the fact that there may be one, if that is so, that doesn't mean that there's no God involved in it. Because after all, what it has achieved is something absolutely mind-blowing that no human mind, let alone natural process, has been able to achieve. We cannot build birds, and we cannot build living cells and so on. Now,
So I can make a bird.
Did you know that bird is a word?
Yeah. Isn't it interesting? In the whole conversation about the word, they also eventually mentioned bird.
They could, yeah. And it's after we were talking about the bird being a word, and yet they recorded this before we said it. Isn't that weird?
Yep.
That's pretty weird, wild stuff. So guys, what he just said, that sounds, you may not have gotten that because it's kind of a difficult point, but there are people who actually subscribe to that thinking. So he just said, suppose there's a naturalistic process. Suppose there's a naturalistic process that gets you life, and then gets you the diversity of life. And it's just cause and effect, particles in motion and stuff. He said, that wouldn't mean there's no God. Why wouldn't that mean there's no God? It's like, it seems like you would, if you held that view, which again, some people hold this view, those are the people who believe that God sort of programmed the entire universe so that it happens this way, right? In other words, if everything is particles in motion, a powerful enough mind could set things up to where this all happens just by cause and effect. So I think the point he's making there, is even if you could explain everything, like you studied it and you're like, oh, I know exactly how this life formed, and yep, it was these particles came together and this and that. The stuff that it produced is so mind-bogglingly complex that even in that situation, you wouldn't say, oh, even though I figured it out, how it happened, you still wouldn't conclude no God. You'd just be, oh, that's the way it was set up. It was programmed to happen like that.
Of this, Alex, and I would emphasize this as a mathematician, amounts to proof.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to say that because you haven't done that, I know, because you're too much of a philosopher to do it. But it's worth saying because people often say to me, can you prove that God exists?
Mm-hmm.
I say, what meaning of the word proof are you using? If you're using it in the axiomatic mathematical sense, here are the axioms, here are the laws of logic, and here's the theorem. No, you can't. But if you use it in the ordinary sense, as a lawyer would say, can you prove beyond reasonable doubt? What you're talking about is evidence. And so my view, therefore, is to go on that side. It's as evidence-based, best explanation.
Mm-hmm.
What is the best explanation of what we see? And it seems to me that the notion of a creative God is not a gap explanation. We can't explain this, therefore God did it. No, it's in the nature of the thing.
Check it out. Pedoro says, I say bollocks. Hey, fun fact, Pedoro. You can say anything.
If you say bollocks, you're probably British. So
if you could say bollocks, you could say not bollocks. Saying something doesn't make it so. Now let me back this up since he was making an important point. Rudely interrupted.
God is not a gap explanation. We can't explain this, therefore God did it. No, it's in the nature of the thing. How can I illustrate that? If I look up, there I see a sign that says exit, let's say. Now, I immediately deduce that whatever natural processes, mechanical processes have gone into production of that sign, there's a mind behind it. Just 4 letters will tell me that. But that is not a mind of the gaps that I'm postulating a mind because I don't know what ultimately caused it. The fact is we do know in our human experience where it comes from. And by analogy, it seems to me that therefore the best explanation of the word-based universe, as I put it, is that there is a word ultimately who is God. Now, that's only one.
That was interesting. So notice what he said there, guys. The best explanation. That is a good way to put it, because when you have you have different kind of atheists, and it's important to understand what kind of atheist you're dealing with. You have the sort of atheist troll. Prove to me that God exists, but I will not accept any evidence at all. Okay, don't waste your time. And you have other atheists who, hey, they believe that there's just no God and things can happen on their own or by some other means or something like that. But when someone's saying, can you prove this? Can you prove that? Can you prove this? You do need to do what he just said. You got to say, hey, what exactly do you mean by prove? But sort of if you're making an argument, like a design argument or something like that, you're making an argument to the best explanation. You're saying, hey, the best explanation for the way this is God. Now, why is that important? Because what you'll find lots of atheists do is if you make your argument, and then the atheist, but what about this? Maybe it's this, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. Oh, okay, maybe. That's not the best explanation. So it seems to be built into the thinking of lots of atheists. If I can come up with any theoretically possible alternative explanation, then you haven't proven your case. That's stupid. So for instance, is it mathematically certain or something like that I'm here right now? That you're watching me? No. Again, you could be dreaming. You could be in the Matrix. There are all other possibilities. There are all kinds of other possibilities. What's the best explanation for why you're seeing me right now? The best explanation is that I'm actually here and we're doing a live stream. That's the best explanation. Are there alternatives? Yes. But those alternatives are not the best explanation. So when you're reasoning, making an argument, you got to be careful because, again, some people will just, but you haven't proven that this other thing couldn't be the case. Well, I wasn't trying to. I'm just saying this is the best explanation. If you have a better explanation, by all means, give me the better explanation. But don't just say, here's another possibility.
Strand
Yep.
of evidence for my belief in God.
Yes, I mean, for me, the most powerful argument for the existence of God has long since been the argument for the existence of God from the number of arguments for the existence of God. It seems...
That's interesting. I actually want to cut that. Alex O'Connor says this is the most powerful argument for God's existence. Did you see what he said? That was actually interesting because once he said it, because I didn't see this part. I've sort of jumped around and seen some of this, but I did not see that part. That's actually interesting. Going back here.
Belief in God.
Yes, I mean, for me, the most powerful argument for the existence of God has long since been the argument for the existence of God from the number of arguments for the existence of God. It seems like anywhere you look, you can construct one. There's an argument from biology and consciousness or beauty or contingency, the existence of this microphone. It's quite phenomenal in that respect. But
that is interesting, guys. You get that? I actually like that. I've thought about that too. Like Alvin Plantinga, he had a lecture years ago, and they made a book where people expanded on the arguments and so on. But the lecture was famously titled 24 or so arguments for the existence of God, and it was actually more than 24. That's why he said 24 or so. And so he gave 24. He gave over 24 arguments for the existence of God. And what's interesting is some of the main arguments that you're familiar with weren't even on that list. Some of the main arguments that you hear people use, he was giving like philosophical arguments, and so some of the main like scientific arguments and stuff. Lots of other arguments that you're familiar with weren't even on the list. And so you're dealing with dozens and dozens of arguments for the existence of God. And so Alex, hey, probably the best argument is the argument that you've got so many arguments all kind of pointing in the same direction. That is interesting, isn't it?
That's an interesting thing to say.
Yes, I'm going to clip that.
With regards to this, and I want to be clear for our listeners, when you point to the fire exit sign and talk about how we know that has a mind behind it, you're not drawing an analogy there to evolution directly. People might be misunderstanding you. Like, you're not saying, well, because I know that had a mind, I know that biology must have a mind. I think you're saying something more specific, which is that saying that there was a mind behind this word exit is not just plugging in a gap because you've got no better thing to put inside of it.
That's what
you've instead got a reason. There's something in the nature of the thing which gives you reason to think that a mind created it. Now,
everyone catch it. I will back it up a couple seconds just so we didn't interrupt, but you got to understand that, and that is the biggest problem. You've just got lots of atheists who you build your entire case for the existence of God, and then you say, so God is the best explanation. They'll go, that's the God of the gaps argument, just because they've been taught that. I want to be clear. The God of the gaps argument was invented by Christians responding to other Christians who started arguing based on, we haven't figured this out, so therefore God is responsible for that. Other Christians are like, you're arguing for a God of the gaps. You just have a gap in knowledge. Don't build your argument based on gaps. God is behind it all. God is what accounts for it all. So don't sit there and go with the gap. What are you talking about? God is the explanation for what we know, not this gap in your knowledge and so on. So it was Christians who came up with the God of the gaps response to Christians who were just arguing based on gaps in their understanding and so on. Then atheists took off with it, and then it worked its way to the popular level where people just go, "Up, any argument you're arguing for the existence of God," they say, "Oh, God of the gaps." No, it's not. So he uses the sign as an example. An exit sign. So I see an exit sign. I see 4 letters and stuff like that. I wasn't there. I don't know who made that. I don't know who put it there. Based on everything I know and all my experience and so on, I know someone made that and someone put that there. Oh, it's a person of the gaps argument. No, I'm arguing based on everything I know. All the evidence that I have tells me that. Is it possible there's some other explanation? Yeah, sure. All the evidence I've ever seen points in the direction of that thing being caused by a person who put it there, something along those lines. And so when you're arguing for an intelligent creator of the universe or an intelligent designer behind DNA and so on, that's not God of the gaps. You're saying everything I know about where information comes from tells me it comes from a mind. And therefore, if I see it out there and I'm not, and you're saying I don't know the source, okay, maybe there are other possibilities, but all the evidence I have tells me that a mind is responsible for that.
I think I agree with you in saying that to say God is behind evolution is not, at least necessarily, a God of the gaps argument. I'm happy to say that there is very plausible reason for somebody to look at the majesty of the natural world and say, and the language coding of DNA, and say, yeah, there must be some intelligence behind this. For me, the question is then, well, is that argument or is that consideration convincing enough? I also agree with what you said about like language. I described it as an analogy, but when you mentioned computer coding, and I thought about binary code, a series of zeros and ones, which of course is only analogous to the words that I'm speaking in English, but to say that it's not really a language would be perhaps a sort of confusion of terms.
I think so. Yeah.
But okay. So,
yes, binary language is language. And you've got the language of DNA, and then you've got a different language to make proteins. And so, in other words, guys, it's like you've got a set of instructions and they're in Chinese. And then the actual things as they're put together, the language is English. And you have to translate the instructions into what you're actually building. That goes on in your cells. So you have multiple languages being spoken in your cells and being translated from one to another. Anyway, yes, if that makes perfect sense to you on naturalism, then I'd love to hear you explain it to me.
So the question for me then is whether I have good enough reason to think that a God might be behind this. You said that this process is something that no human mind could ever create. We can't create a bird. I think the reason we can't create a bird is because, firstly, we don't have enough time, because birds take, I don't know, probably billions of years. If we accept that evolution does begin with some single-celled organism, however that got to be there.
Yes.
And I'm happy to say, okay, perhaps there is some kind of intelligent creator of this first, this first sort of prime biological being. Fine. If we then sort of track this process of evolution, the reason why a human mind can't create a bird is because it's not done by a direct, intelligent design. It's done by a sort of series of billions of years of trial and error, such that I could create a bird in the sense that if I could somehow set up some simple beginning conditions, I could then just sort of let it go in its environment, and in billions of years it would turn into a bird. The important
No, that's a huge leap.
This is a very I love Alex O'Connor. I think he's very intelligent, but I don't understand how he got down this path of thinking, because I think it's a very very faulty process of thinking. How do you even get down there? You can't even begin to explain what it would mean or what it would look like to attempt to create a bird. The comparison that he makes here of, trying to create something and then over time becoming a bird. I don't know. He just skipped like a billion steps.
Yeah, it sounded like he was saying, and I think if you, and I don't know what Lennox is going to respond, but yeah, I think if you let Alex explain himself a little more and point out some of the difficulties, I think he'd retract some of that or rephrase it, because it sounded like what he's saying. Hey, if I wanted to, no, of course I can't just directly create a bird. But if you just let me start off with an organism and I make an organism, like I make a single cell and just give it enough time, then that's how I'll create a bird. No, no, that's the issue. How are you getting from the single cell to the bird? There's, like, as you pointed out, there's a lot of steps in there. There are a lot of steps in there. In other words, if I wanted to create a bird, I would not just create a single cell and say, okay, I'll give it a few billion years. That would be anyway. Back to
one thing is getting it going. That's, to me, where the really important question is. It's not so much in the process of evolution that I discover something
that's
amazing.
Interesting, because to my mind, getting it going is one of the hardest things.
Yeah.
The origin of life is much harder because you don't have life to give you all
I'm
that
agreeing with you.
variation.
I mean to say that to me is where the question is, like, this mystery of how on earth would you get this initial
that's right.
Yeah. So he's saying, hey, once you have life, then it's no problem getting the rest through evolution. So yeah, the difficult step is getting life. No, it is a huge difficult step to get life, and it's good Alex is aware of that. Because lots of atheists, this is what I taught. Yeah, you get the right, chemical soup and so on, and eventually come together if you got enough time. And it's you're really, really lucky, but it could happen. No, you do the math. No, I mean, it's not logically impossible, but so unbelievably unlikely that you shouldn't put much confidence in something like that happening. But you also have tons and tons and tons of developments along the way that are also massively improbable. So yeah, it almost sounded like you were saying, yeah, once you got it, then yeah, the rest is no problem. No, it's nothing but problems for your view if you think it all happened naturally.
Yeah, I think if you just give Alex a chance to restate and rephrase this, I think he would do a better job. I think he just kind of tripped up here. But I think he pretty much got the idea.
Let's see.
But for me, what I'm saying is that once you have that, and even if you need God to get that, I don't think you then require this concept of intelligent design to describe the process that then goes on as it begins to replicate in environments that select for different qualities, if you know.
Everyone, Stephen Meyer, someone please suggest to Alex that he interview Stephen Meyer in exactly this way on that topic, specifically on that topic. Like, how do you get, matter of fact, have Stephen Meyer grant, just for argument's sake, grant a first living cell. Alex, then please tell him your view. And what's cool about Alex is he's open to correction and so on. Tell him your view that you don't think it's much of a problem getting from that one cell to all the species that we are familiar with and so on, and let him break it down for you.
Well, what I would say to that is, if you've got God already to start it off, you've got God.
Exactly.
And perhaps you needn't worry too much about the rest.
Yes. So for me, I then look at this and say, okay, I've got then this, now what is actually a mystery, which is the beginning of life.
Yeah.
Which some people tell me is good reason to believe in a God. And other people say, it might be, it might not be, there might be some kind of explanation. Maybe the lightning zaps the ocean or whatever it is that they believe. Okay, fine. So now then I'm looking at this process of evolution, which, as I've just said, separate from the mystery of the beginning of life, I'm happy to accept that there's some naturalistic process. And as you've just, I think, importantly pointed out, proof is not the same thing as evidence.
No.
And it's not the same thing as sort of convincing somebody. And so, of course, I don't think that the process of evolution somehow disproves the existence of an immaterial mind behind the universe. But it does seem unlikely that if God's design was to bring about me and people like me so we could enter into a relationship with him, that he would choose to do so through a method which, historically speaking, relies upon the death and destruction of the unfit creatures, which brings up a problem of evil. But as well as that, just seems a little bit arbitrary in that, presuming that my chimpanzee cousin doesn't get to inherit eternal glory and was not made in the image of God, if I track back this evolutionary lineage, either being made in the image of God is something which slowly develops, which seems not quite in line with the idea of God breathing life into Adam.
Absolutely not.
Or there is some apish ancestor and God breathes life into that apish ancestor such that that ancestor can now inherit eternal life, is now part of the Christian story, but his mother is not, and she has no redemption available to her. And it just seems a little bit arbitrary. And
well, it does if you put it that way.
And
this was actually a good response from Alex, guys. This is a serious response. What he said before, as far as if you get a living cell, the rest of it's no problem. Okay, that's complete nonsense. What he said right here, I could put this differently. It's basically come up with two hypotheses. Now, there are other hypotheses, but suppose your two options on the table, your two hypotheses on the table are God created things or just some naturalistic process, no God involved, right? The information contained in DNA and so on, that's evidence that favors a design any hypothesis involving design over something that has no design, right? So that evidence favors a designer hypothesis over a hypothesis that has no designer. But think about this. God could create in any way he wants, right? There's no limit to the different ways God could create if God decides to create. So God could create just directly everything right now if he wanted to. And in fact, God could have created us 5 minutes ago. This has been pointed out by people in the past. God could have created us 5 minutes ago with fake memories of everything that's happened during our lives. And how would we even know, right? So God could have created like that. God could create individual species and so on and let them develop. God could create every organism direct. God could create in all kinds of different ways. God could also create through an evolutionary process where he creates a cell, lets that cell go for a while, then adds some information to the system, lets that go for a while, adds some more information to the system and so on. And so things are developing. Okay. God could create in all kinds of ways. The issue for Alex is, why would he create in this way where everything that's alive now is just, you're sitting on a mountain of death and disease and bloodshed that got you here? Why would God create in the way that is massively dependent on so much death, disease, and bloodshed to get you to this, to get you here? That's kind of the issue. And if you wanted to compare the hypotheses, you'd say, okay, from a naturalistic perspective, if naturalism is true, how would you get life as we know it? There's kind of only one option on the table. You have to be really, 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 really lucky to get the first life. And then it has to evolve by a process that involves lots and lots of death, disease, and bloodshed along the way. Because it's just nature, trial and error all along until you get to us. So if you wanted to put it in, if you wanted to make an argument out of this, you'd have to say, yes, God could create through this process of evolution. Why would God pick the one way of creating all of life? Why would God pick the one way that just happens to be the only way you could get it without God? Like, why create in the one way that's the only way you could get it on the alternative? Keep in mind, there are responses to that. There are explanations for why God would create in the way that would be the only possible way you could get it on naturalism and so on. But anyway, that's not a dumb point. When he's, well, I'd create a bird by creating, a living cell and just give it billions of years and then I'll get a bird. No, that's silly. What he said here, actually, powerful point. Yes, God could create through evolution. Why would he pick the process that relies on millions and millions of years of death, disease, and bloodshed to eventually get to the human being that he breathes life into, that he breathes, his spirit into?
I think you'll understand what I'm saying in that, I'm not going to present this as some disproof of the existence of theism.
No.
But it certainly does give one pause for thought when you're thinking about a Christian design behind the universe.
Oh, absolutely. And it raises an absolute multitude of questions and is based on a whole lot of assumptions. I think there's another way of coming at this, because as a Christian, I don't simply believe in God. I believe in God as revealed in Jesus Christ. Now,
One second. We got some. So Richie here says he didn't create death according to the Bible. We're not even talking about according, we're saying if God created through evolution. So Lennox would grant God can create through the process of evolution. Alex grants God could, if God exists, God could create everything, all life, through the process of evolution. Alex follows that up. Of course, God could create this way, but why would he create this way? And so he's asking why would God prefer that way other than some other way? That's kind of the issue. And some people have, here you go. Emily says, divine hiddenness. Yeah, your explanation for that would be along the lines of some reasons God has for divine hiddenness. Back to this.
that brings us to a completely different level of understanding. In other words, it's not that I look around the universe and say, is there evidence of an intelligence behind it? I believe there is. But on the other hand, I believe that there's a God who has revealed himself in terms that I can understand, in terms of a person like myself, in some sense. That it's not simply I'm searching for God and I, in the end, come to the conclusion, well, there must be a God. People might be likely to say, well, so what? So what? It's that I think logically, and of course my life didn't develop this way, and that's probably a question you may want to ask, is that intellectually one's reasons for God often come after one's experience of God. And that's quite important, because if it were the case that people had to understand a huge number of philosophical arguments and answers to them to come to faith in God, I would doubt whether that God was worth believing in.
This is
that's APville right there.
Exactly. This is the thing. This is the issue. With so much that they are talking about when it comes to the logical reasons and the evidence for the existence of God and all that, this is where I was stuck for many years, because I think it didn't do anything for me at all. It didn't move anything for me. It wasn't ever meant to do anything for me. It still doesn't do anything for me. What I needed personally, and what I think, I'm just speaking for myself now because this is my experience, but what I think many people out there need as well is not to hear the logical, explanation to I don't know, the creation of the universe and whether there is an intelligent mind behind it or not, but rather a confrontation with the scripture and with how God revealed himself through scripture. What did it for me was not to be convinced that, you know, there must be God because of this and this and this and this premise and that conclusion. It was rather, I could nowadays sit down and kind of and argue that it is very likely that there is a God because of you know, for many different reasons, but that's not what brought me to faith. It's very odd when I say it. When I say it out loud now, but that's not what brought me to it, and I think it's not what brings what brings other people to it. I think lots of people simply need the experience first and the revelation first, and then can talk about the reasoning behind it and the arguments for and against it. I personally, still, after coming to faith, don't necessarily care very much about the arguments for or against. But I can also imagine that there are lots of atheists out there who will spend their lives and will not be convinced with, you know, whether they're logically or scientifically speaking is a God or not. I think lots of people, and people might not be aware of this, might just depend on revelation, on the direct experience of what the scripture is, what the scripture says, and how they can get closer to experiencing the faith and God, rather than approaching it with arguments for theism or against theism.
Hang on. I just saw a comment here. Where'd it go? It's going fast because people are arguing. That's funny. Bain here says, nah, God isn't concerned with us. Interesting here, because here's the thing. Alex makes the point. Yes, God could create through this process of evolution, but why would he pick that process when there are all kinds of other processes that don't rely on so much death, disease, and bloodshed to get the end result? God could just go right to the end result if he wanted to. Why rely on that process and so on, right? So here's the thing. Lennox agreed with him because Alex's point is basically, why would you get this idea of God out of that, right? Why would you think God is responsible for that? Lennox agreed. Yeah, if you were just basing your idea of whatever caused us or created us or something like that on that, no, you wouldn't get the idea of the loving God of Christianity. I think it's so massively improbable that you would get life to begin with, and that an initial life would become all the life we're familiar with. I think that is so massively improbable given a naturalistic framework that I think design is certainly reasonably put into the explanation. But here's what you would say. If you were just basing it on evolution, in other words, that's the evidence you're taking, we're gonna figure out life and how life developed through evolution. That's the only evidence under consideration. I think that would be enough to say, okay, naturalism is stupid, get rid of naturalism. But what kind of creator would you believe in? You'd say, okay, an intelligent creator designed that, but not one that cares a whole lot about how much pain and suffering he's causing, right? So you would posit an indifferent deity. An indifferent deity. It's not a good deity. It's not a good God. It's not a bad God. It's a God that just doesn't care about you. You're insignificant. He's focused on other things. That's actually what David Hume concluded in Dialogues Concerning Natural Religion. People massively misunderstand the dialogues. They think he's defending the problem of evil and attacking the design argument. Not what he's doing at all. He's showing that both sides, the atheist side and the theist side, they're doing the exact same thing, but they're focusing on different things. So the theist takes all the evidence from design in the world and he says, look at the evidence from design. Go where the evidence points. Go where the evidence points. Go where the evidence points. And the atheist plays skeptic and goes, what? No, maybe this happened. Maybe this accounts for it. Maybe this explains it, and so on. And the theist is going, what? How can you just ignore all of this evidence? What's wrong with you? The evidence is so convincing. It's so compelling. Look at DNA. Look at all this stuff, right? And the atheist is playing skeptic. Well, I could come up with other ways of explaining this, right? And so the theist is sitting here, ha ha ha, you're just in denial. Then what does Hume do? Turns to the problem of evil, and it's the same thing but reversed. The atheist is saying, look at all this suffering. Look at all this misery. Look at all this. You're calling this God? And what does the theist do? He starts playing skeptic with it. Well, maybe this is the reason. Maybe that's the reason. Maybe it's because this. Maybe. He's saying they're both doing the same thing. And so what Hume is pointing out is either just be a skeptic, say, I don't know. I don't know what caused any of this. How would I know? My mind isn't, it's just not made for this sort of thing. I can't comprehend whatever is causing all of this. So either just be a skeptic and say, I'm not made to figure this out. Or if you want to just go where the evidence points, if you're saying go where the evidence points, then you do take the evidence for design and you conclude a designer, but also you accept all the evidence of human and animal suffering and you conclude does not care about us. So he says the true conclusion is that the creator is indifferent to all of this. So intelligent creator, he even concludes one. He says, because since you don't find different laws of nature in different places and so on, says that evidence favors one cause. So you have one cause, intelligence to create life, but does not care. And that's what happens when you factor in human and animal suffering. Sounds like Lennox agreed with Alex and would have agreed with Hume. If I were just focusing on life and how we got here, and you said, what conclusion? I might conclude designer, but yeah, maybe you wouldn't conclude the loving God of Christianity. So sounded like he granted that, but then what's he do? He says, but that's not all we're dealing with here. There's other things that we're dealing with. We have we have other things that were going on. And so this is the other important takeaway, ladies and gentlemen. I pointed out earlier, when you've got an atheist saying, prove this, prove that, prove this, prove that, you want to point out, hey, I'm arguing that God is the best explanation for the way things are. God is the best explanation for the way things are. If you have a better explanation, by all means, give it to me. But just playing skeptic is not showing that there's a better explanation. So that's one takeaway. The other part is this is all cumulative. This is all cumulative. There's a ton of stuff going on. There are a ton of arguments, and it's Alex who pointed out that he thinks the best argument for the existence of God is just that there are so many different arguments for the existence of God. But then even all the arguments, you line them all up, there's more at work than that. There's more going on than that. And that's what AP was pointing out. And that's what Lennox was pointing out. So yes, if that were the only piece of evidence that I were building my theology on, yeah, I wouldn't conclude loving God of Christianity. That's not all the evidence I'm looking at. And that's not the only thing I'm looking at. And it's not even the main thing I'm looking at when I conclude that Christianity is true. So anyway, cumulative, ladies and gentlemen, cumulative.
Sense.
I agree with that.
And what I think the wonderful thing is
wait, what did he
God
just agree with? He just said he agreed with. What was the last thing he said?
For God often come after one's experience of God. And that's quite important, because if it were the case that people had to understand a huge number of philosophical arguments and answers to them to come to faith in God, I would doubt whether that God was worth believing in a sense.
I agree with that.
And what I think the wonderful thing is that God has revealed himself. And people sometimes say to me, look, this is arrogant. You can't know anything about God. There's a so-called apophatic tradition, which you will know all about, that if you say this is God, it can't be God because you can't grasp God. Now, that's a very humble attitude, except that what Scripture reveals to me is that God wants us to know certain things. This is eternal life, that you might know God. And if God allows me to know certain things, then it's arrogant to say that's impossible. So, on the one hand, of course you can't put God in a box and know everything. On the other hand, if God has revealed himself and says there are certain things you can know, then I want to know those things. And that's where you mentioned earlier the relationship with God becomes extremely important, because in my life, it was really the first thing about God I learned within the Christian tradition that my parents explained to me, and that's another whole story, by the way, because they were very unusual parents. And I should mention this, that
I would actually be interested in what his parents were like. He's saying they were unusual. Anyone know? Has he written about this or talked about it anywhere? Because I don't think he's mentioned as a side issue, like, oh, I could talk about this. I'm wondering, has anyone ever seen him talk about this? Anyway.
They loved me enough not to force their beliefs down my throat, and actually encouraged me to read other worldviews. And there's a lovely story where my father, when I was about 14, gave me a book. And I said, "What is it, Dad?" He said, "It's the Communist Manifesto." I said, "Have you read it?" He said, "No." Well, why should I read it? And I'll never forget his answer, "Because you need to know what other people think."
Well,
that was a very enlightened view for a father in Northern Ireland in that period of time.
Especially for a 14-year-old.
Yes.
And I owe a lot to my parents because...
I mean, especially, I mean, that's kind of when he was a kid, that's kind of the heyday of communism, right? That's still like serious live option for lots of people. Maybe this is we've had many more decades of experience now to say, okay, communism really doesn't work. That's back when more people thought, hey, maybe this will work back then. So his dad saying, hey, go ahead and read this. You need to understand what people are thinking.
They presented the Bible to me as intellectually exciting. It got me into history. It got me into archaeology. It got me into evidences. It was far from boring, and it certainly wasn't bigoted in any way. And I'm very grateful for that, because the moment I got to Cambridge, it gave me the opportunity to meet people who didn't share my worldview. And I've been meeting them ever since. So that's really a brief bit of my background. But it was encountering God, the fact that I could get to know God as a personal God who would give me certain basic things that I knew I needed, even as a young lad. And the first was peace with God, forgiveness, knowing I had a relationship. And as I look around young people today, and I feel I've got to mention this and use it in view of the stuff we hear in the news all the time, young people looking for belonging, looking for meaning in life, looking for a purpose. You see, I found all of those things in my relationship with Christ very young, when I was about 10 years old. And in that sense, the rest of life, 70 years after that, I'm still exploring that relationship. There's a lot of mystery to it, but there's been a lot of reality to it where God, I believe, has proved himself, his existence, his reality, his involvement in my life, way beyond philosophical and intellectual arguments, but in the business of everyday life.
Yes.
And that's it.
That's interesting. What he just said, I mean, it's different, but it reminds me of Aquinas after he'd written, I think Summa Theologia is like 2 million words or something like that. And that was one of 60 of his works or something like that. It's like insane, the amount of content he's put out. But towards the end of his life, he had some sort of mystical experience in church, and he said that he's come to regard everything he's written as just straw. It's like something was like way more powerful to him than all his arguments back, because all Thomas Aquinas did was present arguments and attack them and come up with better arguments and stuff. It's all he did. But something was so overwhelming to him that it was like massively beyond that. So that's not exactly what John Lennox is saying here, but he's pointing out it's not just the arguments, and they're not what's most important for him. That actually knowing God is more powerful. So yeah, guys, think about that, right? If you were to say, David, do you believe that AP exists? Of course I believe AP exists. Why? Well, the main reason would be I know him. I know him. I could make arguments. I could start saying, okay, well, you know, I see him. I've met him multiple times. We took a trip to Israel and so on. But think about this. How do you know that someone wasn't tricking you? Or how do you know that's not a hologram? Or how do you know a mad scientist wasn't messing with your brain and making you think all these things and so on? You could make arguments to try and respond to those things, but it doesn't change the fact that the main reason I think AP exists is because I know him. That's the main reason. Arguments, you could make arguments, but it's not like formulating arguments is not how you know these kinds of things.
This is we recently talked about. I feel like I brought him up several times now during our last live streams. Maximus the Confessor, Saint Maximus the Confessor,
Maximus the Merciful.
I have a recent obsession with him, but he basically said something about how theology without faith is basically nothing, and how I would do it great injustice trying to quote him, but basically how trying to figure out and spending your time putting God into words without experiencing God is basically amounts to nothingness and all that. I need to spend lots of time reading more from him and about him, but it's basically the idea.
You haven't lost your reading ability by watching so many videos?
I did.
Got to get it back. There's actually a funny super chat about what we were just talking about. I have to get down to them because we got a bunch of super chats. I have one base pair wrong. Hey, this is interesting. This is along the lines of what I was saying about my kids. I have one base pair wrong in 3 billion, and hence muscular dystrophy. Did not know that. I don't mean about you specifically. I didn't know that that's what causes muscular dystrophy. I think God created stage by stage, but it wasn't random. It was steered, or the process was designed. Particle physics like Lego 2. It's hard to argue with someone for the existence of God when they assume a heretical view of divinity. The better question would be if the unmoved mover has personhoods. Yeah, what you'd say is this argument, if it's successful, proves an unmoved mover. That's kind of the idea behind a cumulative case. If you prove an unmoved mover, what have you proved? You prove something that isn't moved by something else, but which sets everything else in motion and so on. That's consistent with God, but that doesn't give you everything that is involved in a concept of God. So yeah, you then need other arguments to show you personhood. Mojob has entered the chat. Fire plus fire equals big fire. That is good. It's one of the most powerful arguments ever by Muhammad Hijab. Guys, if you don't know what that's about, you can check it out. David, are you still not sold on a young Earth? By rejecting evolution, haven't you already rejected the only reason millions of years would be needed? Am I still not sold on a young Earth? No, I'm not sold on a young Earth. All of creation is teleological, exit sign and universe. Yeah, that is also true. All of creation is teleological. Muhammad answers everything in Sahih al-Bukhari 3208. We are all blood clots that are breathed into the gap. Allah's fresh mints. God bless D-Wood and AP. Yes, this is true. We had the answers there. Michelle Marie says rate of change is used to describe time. The function S gives the position of an object relative to its origin as a function of time, t. A position changes by delta t. The object changes its position by the amount of delta S equal. You could describe time. That's not a definition of time. But that's the point, right? Look at what you're saying. You've got rate. That's a time word to describe time. Function S, position of object relative to its origin is a function of time. Position changes and so on. It's like you can't define the word without using words that assume you know what the word means and so on. The only point of the point is, I mean, the only point is that you know things without being able to give precise definitions of them. And so always demanding a precise definition don't assume that because you can't define something precisely or something like that means you don't understand it, or because lots of things that we understand and that we know, we could not give precise definitions to. Matthew 20:16, you find me there, but do not make more of me. I am not there yet, but do not make me less. I am a witness. I know that God exists. Google just created a new novel mathematical algorithm through AI and evolution of the algorithm. Created a new novel mathematical algorithm through AI and evolution of the algorithm. However, the process was set up and steered by Google. It was not by accident. Curated evolution. Darwinian evolution, specifically macroevolution, that also proposes human ancestry. It is the most presupposed theory that has captured academia. Despite all the evidence we have suggested, none of that happened, and I hate it. Things are changing. You are getting serious challenges to the neo-Darwinian model. I've thought a lot on this, and I think this life is probably a test to see what we will do with our free will. Did we choose to live in sin and or accept God? Well, life isn't just a test. It has value in itself, apart from being a test, but you can believe that God is also seeing what you're going to do with your free will. Experiencing God is what changed my life. Interesting.
It's powerful.
And I have to say, because this has come up before, like when I'm explaining how I became a Christian, when I explain how I became a Christian, I talk about wrestling with a couple of arguments and just sort of getting to the point where it's like, okay, if I pray and this eventually turns out not to be true, it's not like I'm getting worse. But if Christianity were true, this is something that is actually important. So why don't I pray and see where this leads? And if it doesn't lead anywhere, okay, at least I tried. But after so when I talk about that, what got me to that point was, it's three kinds of arguments. It was a kind of design argument. It was a kind of moral argument, and evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. But after that, everything like rapidly changed. And I talk about like when I prayed the first prayer and I sat up and I say everything looked different, and then everything started changing. It's like I'll give arguments. I'll say the role that arguments played. But if I'm talking to an atheist and like, oh, you go to stupid, it's still just embedded in my head, like that experience. Like, okay, what do I do with that? Like, how would I deny that experience? So anyway, these are fun times. What do you think of Orthodox Muslim chest bumping God logic? I'm not familiar with Orthodox Muslims, so I don't know.
I don't know much about him except that he challenged us to a debate recently, both me and Dawood, and we accepted it, and we are supposed to set it up. But the funny thing is, I think I didn't even tell you, right? But we were supposed to have a debate. We were supposed to have like 3 debates or so.
I think you said 2 Muslims challenged us to a 2-on-2 on something.
Yeah, but we were setting it up. But then on my way back from the last debate with Andrew, I saw James Modern Day Debate on my way back at the airport again. We talked a little bit, and I said to him, "I'm really tired right now of debates. I don't really want to do debates right now. I want to focus on different things. So how about we give it a rest and we get back to it sometime in the future, in a few months or so?" And he said, "Sure, yeah, okay, let's do that." So we're supposed to debate him and some other dude, maybe in a few months or so. I don't
know. Yeah, that would be under investigation.
By the FBI, yeah.
One of the guys I heard about supports doxing people or something like that. I don't know. I just heard that from someone. Someone messaged me. He's like, "Hey, be careful." I'm not sure. One of the guys hey, this guy supports doxing people or something like that. If so, someone and anyone he's associated with is blacklisted. I'd have to see what that's based on, if it's actually true, because again, it's just something someone said. But yeah, that would be enough to blacklist the person. But the other thing is, I'm occasionally seeing messages, why are you running from these guys? Guys, I know that's impressive in your little Dawa clown minds. We will say he's scared. If I have no clue who you are and you say, oh, he was running from me, I think you're a moron and I'm not interested in anything to do with you. For some reason, the most popular thing to do is for some new guy that no one's ever heard of comes along and says, hey, everyone is running from me. That is the quickest way for me to never be interested in interacting with you, ever.
I am indeed running. Hope you're happy. Somebody said, what about the upcoming geopolitical debate? I don't know what you're talking about.
Your big upcoming geopolitical debate.
I don't know what you mean. What happened with this upcoming geopolitical? I don't know what you mean. What are you talking about? What are you talking about, man?
If Genesis 1:26 doesn't mean flesh and bones, then Genesis 2:7 doesn't have to mean oxygen and lungs. It could mean spirit, soul, awareness. I don't know. I don't have any official position on those passages as far as exactly how God's creating. Michelle Marie says, the language of God is logos, where we get the word logic. I attempted to show this logic mathematically in order to show how God created everything by his word, which is revealed in Jesus Christ. Well, then I agree. Not necessarily with your proof. I'd have to look at that further. But yeah, I agree with the principle. Hi, D-Wood. Out of topic, I can see you are a boxing fan. What are your thoughts about Manny Pacquiao and about the Maypac fight? God bless. Oh, hi, AP the Gray. Yeah, Pacquiao's one of the greatest of all time. He's also old. What's he like? Something like 46 now or something like that? He's pretty old. George Foreman actually managed to pull off boxing even when he was old, way past his prime, and was still very effective even when he was old. Usually guys lose it over time. They're not as quick, not as strong as, and so on. And so they're a bit like, I think it was Sugar Ray Leonard came out and fought like in his 40s. I think he fought Macho Camacho. And in his prime, Sugar Ray Leonard, one of the all-time greats, couldn't deal with a younger fighter when he got older. So Pacquiao, hats off to him, still fighting and stuff like that. Just based on experience, it's very rare for a boxer to be in his 40s and be able to compete with someone young and in his prime. So we'll see what happens. After the fall, God changed creation, obviously retroactively start to end, hence using death and suffering to show us that evil is horrific. That is one interpretation. I find more often than not, atheists go to mocking and ridicule instead of actually answering my points and questions when I talk to them, like saying Sky Daddy just makes you sound stupid, not intelligent. Yeah, that's why I said figure out what kind of atheist you're talking to. If you're talking to just someone who's a troll and isn't really interested, don't waste your time. In fact, I should put out a video on this. I have a little test. When someone shows up in the chat, prove to me that God exists. I don't mean here. I mean like in the comment section, someone prove to me. I've done this over and over again. No atheist has ever succeeded. An atheist will come along and go, prove to me that God exists. And to test whether I'm dealing with a troll or not, because you can kind of tell by the way they're talking, it's a troll. Here, troll is just someone who's trying to get you arguing to waste your time. There's no evidence that they're going to accept. So anyway, when someone says, prove to me that God exists, the first thing I'll say is, first prove to me that you exist, since I don't want to start arguing with a non-existent person. And then they start trying to prove their own existence to me. And I play skeptic. And when I play skeptic, what I'm doing is I'm showing them what they do, right? But I'm doing it while they're trying to show that they exist. I'm responding going, well, how do I know you really exist? How do I know you're not a bot? How do I know you're not some sort of AI bot that's been programmed to waste my time? Yeah, how do I know it's not a bunch of monkeys banging on a keyboard and printing and typing out this message? How do I know that I'm not in the Matrix? How do I know this? How do I know I'm not dreaming? How do I know that? no atheist has ever been able to prove his existence to me when I'm playing skeptic. When I play skeptic, no atheist can prove his existence to me. The point I'm trying to make by doing that is to show the atheist what you do with the existence of God, I could do with you. In other words, just that's no proof, that's no evidence. I can come up with alternatives. Any idiot can do that. In other words, you have a methodology that can be used to deny almost anything. And then the new atheist basically taught this to a bunch of young idiots and said, here's how you deal with the existence of God. Just that's no proof, that's no evidence. What about this? What about that? Sky daddy. Great. I can do that too. And it's kind of a rule. If the methodology you're using wouldn't allow you to prove your own existence, you probably need a new methodology. Why are you trying to show off? You're acting like, I got a drill around here too. Probably trying to be like me. Oh, hey everyone, AP builds his own shelves now because he's got a drill. Yeah, right. Hey, look at this. AP doesn't exist. Allah makes it appear like he exists, you see? That was actually the comment I wanted to get to.
That's a good point.
Yeah. As far as how would I know AP exists? Guess what? This would be this would be another possibility, right? One possible explanation for why I think AP exists is that Allah is tricking me into thinking that AP exists. Well, that would explain things, right? Is that the best explanation? No.
Yes.
Yo, AP and D Wood, did you see God Logic and Orthodox Muslim? No. But we've heard about it from multiple people. You guys are awesome. I never see you live, and I'm actually an hour and 50 minutes behind right now. God bless. That's cool.
It's difficult to see us live. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah, there's no way to do it. It's almost impossible. The measurement of when A occurs versus when B occurs.
Ah.
I don't think that would actually be a sufficient definition of time. I think that would be an important part, but I need you both to stop what you're doing now and answer this question. What hybrid could you choose? Hyundai Tucson? Tucson. Honda CR-V or Toyota RAV4?
RAV4.
I'll just agree with AP on that one. And then Michelle says, I think therefore I am.
I just think that the RAV4 looks cool. I don't really.
It's got a cool name. It's got the cool name RAV4, right?
Yeah.
That sounds cool. That sounds cool. All right, let's watch a little more of this and then.
Seems to me to be a very important dimension.
Oh yeah, I like to remind people that the whole project of what they call natural theology, which is arguments for the existence of God, the Kalam cosmological argument, this kind. A lot of people, and I think particularly atheists, mistake that very specific kind of thought for religious thought as a whole.
Yes.
And believe that that is sort of the appropriate methodology through which everyone should engage with the subject material. And I like to remind people that most people don't believe in God because of an argument. Arguments are sustaining, or they give you justification for your beliefs, but the belief itself came through some kind of experience. That's time and time again. The only person I can think of as a counterexample to this might be Anthony Flew, who says that he was convinced by various arguments, I think involving free will and things, but for most people it's an experience, and I think that's perfectly legitimate. And that
Anthony Flew, by the way, whom I knew towards the end of his life, and I asked him about this. It was a specific argument that convinced him.
Which one was it?
Design argument.
It was the argument I've mentioned about the language-like nature of DNA.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I suddenly got the opportunity he was in high old age, not long before his death, to visit him in his home. And I asked him about this. I said, what was it? Well, he said, this argument seemed to me to be conclusive and seemed to be where the evidence led. And if people didn't like it, they could lump it, you see. So he came to believe in God. He became a theist or a deist, I think, technically speaking. And then the amusing thing to my mind is he wrote a book with N.T. Wright. He got N.T. Wright.
Let me read something to you, man.
What?
I think I think this is very, very cool. Wait. Okay, let me get to it. Faith is knowledge that cannot be rationally demonstrated. Faith is knowledge that cannot be rationally demonstrated. If such knowledge cannot be rationally demonstrated, then faith is a supernatural relationship through which, in an unknowable and so undemonstrable manner, we are united with God in a union which is beyond intellection. This is a
Is that some AI thing that you just
No, this is a quote by Saint Maximus.
Oh, interesting.
This is to the point that we were discussing earlier. It's beautiful. And here another one here. Just as the thought of fire does not warm the body, so faith without love does not actualize the light of spiritual knowledge in the soul. This is very, very good stuff, man.
You should start putting those quotes on X, man.
Yeah, I should. This is from, I don't know who put this together. Maybe this is a book, but it is a book. It is a book, 400 Texts on Love by Saint Maximus the Confessor. That's awesome. Speaks about such things very beautifully. Powerful, powerful.
So you rudely interrupted John Lennox for that?
Yes.
Hey, everyone, in case you don't know who they're talking about Anthony Flew. He's one of the top philosophical atheists of the 20th century. He debated Gary Habermas, I think, 3 times on the resurrection. They made a book out of 1 or 2 of those debates. He was cool because this is before the new atheism. He's like a gentlemanly scholar. He wrote one of the most famous essays that's used in like anthologies on philosophy of religion. The one about the two explorers going through a jungle, and they come across something that looks like a garden and so on. So that's anyone who's taken philosophy of religion has read that. But yeah, he eventually became a kind of theist. He's the guy I've mentioned multiple times over the years. After he became a theist, he did an interview with Gary Habermas because they'd already debated multiple times. But Habermas asked him, so you're sort of a generic theist. Do you think you'll ever convert to something specific like Christianity or Islam? And he said, no. And then Habermas said, well, you spent your life studying these things. What are your thoughts on Christianity and Islam? And he drew 3 comparisons. He said, he compared Paul and Muhammad, he compared Jesus and Muhammad, and he compared the Bible and the Quran. He said, 3 things come to mind. 1, Paul had a brilliant philosophical mind. He spoke multiple languages and so on, just brilliant guy. And he goes, Muhammad's basically the opposite of that. And he said, Jesus is an amazingly charismatic figure. Everyone wants Jesus on his side. Muhammad, no. And he said, the Bible is an amazing work of literature that everyone, even atheists, need to understand and appreciate. He goes, to read the Quran is to do penance. That was it. To read the Quran is to do penance. Penance is where you punish yourself for your sins. It's just interesting. It's just fascinating that, because he's not a Christian. He's not trying to defend Christianity. It's just a guy who's really old and about to die, giving his assessments of everything he's studied throughout his life. Fun stuff. Interesting fellow.
To write about the Christian evidence for God as part of that book. But he had come to the conclusion, and I remembered very well the conversation because of its honesty. I asked him, what about the objections to Christianity that you've used all your life against miracles?
To be clear for our listeners, Anthony Flew is at the time, especially like quite well-known atheist professor who had sort of made a career at this point out of, in part, arguing about God's existence and was famed for his atheism.
He was a...
Hang on. He keeps calling him Anthony Flew. Is he just... Because his name is Antony. Like, so it's Antony. And he's calling him Anthony. But he's also like... he's also like, he was a little kid when he was like a little kid. Matter of fact, he wasn't even born when Anthony Flew was popular. So guys, is Anthony in Great Britain, do UK people call him Anthony Flew, even though there's no H, or is this just Alex? Just thinking his name's Anthony. I don't know, because like I actually want to know if people actually call him Anthony Flew in the UK. That would be interesting. Then I would want to know that in case. Anyway, I don't know.
Professor at Reading, who was a world authority on David Hume, and who regarded miracles of the type of the Bible as violations of the law of nature, and they couldn't therefore occur. And what he said to me when I asked him about that, he said, I was wrong about flu. That's something for a philosopher to say at the end of his life.
He said, I was wrong about flu.
Flu. Oh, sorry. He said, I was wrong about Hume. All my writing about Hume would have to be rewritten, but I'll never live to do it. I thought it was very touching, actually. In other words, Hume's analysis of miracles is false, and that's another matter altogether about which I've written. But yes.
Yeah, Hume's argument about miracles, that's another thing anyone who goes into philosophy of religion or something like that, or takes a class on philosophy of religion, is going to run into. Terrible argument, considering how popular it has become.
It was the DNA.
And I'm saying that as someone who really, I love the dialogues concerning natural religion. I disagree with a ton of stuff in it, but one of my top 4 or 5 all-time favorite works in philosophy is Hume's dialogues concerning natural religion. So disagree with a lot of Hume, but I'm a Hume fan, David Hume fan. His argument on miracles, what a stupid bunch of blunders he makes in there.
Language like nature of DNA. And I think Stephen Meyer mentions that in one of his books somewhere.
Yes, it's certainly picked up steam, I think, in the popular apologetic space as well as of late.
Yeah, but you're right. You're right in the sense that you meet relatively few people for whom the intellectual argument was at the top. Alistair McGrath might be another person. Who was challenged intellectually. He came up here as an atheist.
Yes.
To Oxford. And
Alistair McGrath, yeah, I met him. He's Alistair McGrath, yeah. I've heard, I didn't verify this with him, but I've heard he reads a book a day and he has total recall. He remembers everything he reads. But I met him. That's a weird dude. All the people who have like these amazing intellectual abilities, it's like their brains don't work as well in other areas, and they just come across as like kind of really weird. But this was the dude. This was kind of funny. It was Alistair McGrath who debated Daniel Dennett. This was at New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. This was a long time ago. I was there with Nabil, Mary Jo Sharp, my wife, a few others. Here's this is actually funny. The room they debated in is like this long, narrow room. And these guys are up at the front debating. And we got in kind of like after everyone else was seated. So we had to sit in the back of this long, narrow room. And Alistair McGrath gives his presentation. Then Daniel Dennett, so one of the 4 horsemen of the new atheists, he actually starts, he goes to start his opening statement. And he's got the PowerPoint. He's got the PowerPoint clicker. And he goes, okay, so let me, well, let's, okay, I don't know what to do here. Okay, I don't know what to do here. It's not working. It's not working. I'm in the back. And I knew he couldn't hear me because I'm too far in the back, but he's going, I don't know what to do here. And I'm in the back and I go, the Lord has spoken. And, all the Christians who were there, I thought I was an atheist who was making fun of them for being the sort of people who would say, the Lord has spoken. But it wasn't. I just thought it was funny. And so all the Christians turned around to me, like started giving me these mean, glaring look because I said the Lord has spoken because his PowerPoint clicker wouldn't work. But anyway, that was when I met Alistair McGrath. Weird dude. But yeah, that dude, read a massive amount of stuff and became a Christian and Christian apologist. And he's like John Lennox as far as like having a bunch of degrees and respected and doing awesome research and so on, and yet not on board with the atheism train.
I think I don't do him an injustice. He started to investigate. I have met a number of people like that, but as you say, they are relatively few.
Yes. And also it kind of feels as though, I like to imagine if Christianity were true, what might I expect?
Yes.
And I suppose what I would kind of expect is for God to meet you where you're at, which means...
Alistair McGrath, Irish theologian. Why are all these guys Irish? Irish theologian, Anglican priest, intellectual historian, scientist, Christian apologist, and public intellectual. He currently holds the Andreas Idrias Professorship in Science and Religion in the Faculty of Theology and Religion, and is a Fellow of Harris Manchester College at the University of Oxford, and a Professor of Divinity at Gresham College. He was previously Professor of Theology, Ministry, and Education at King's College London, Head of the Centre for Theology, Religion, and Culture, Professor of Historical Theology at the University of Oxford, and was Principal of Wycliffe Hall, Oxford, until 2005. You see all those different background? Theologian, priest, intellectual historian, scientist, Christian apologist. And then it's just weird that he holds all these positions at different places in completely different fields. Anyway, smart dude. Weird dude. That's a weird dude. If you talk to him, you'll see how weird he is.
that if you are of that kind of mindset,
he'd meet you there.
Exactly. But I think the point that you made before, which is important to stress, is that you might find God at the bottom of the microscope, but it would be unreasonable to suspect that you have to.
Oh, absolutely.
Because what this does, I think a lot of people don't realize, is it creates an intellectual barrier for entry to relationship with God, which, if Christianity is true, that simply can't be the case.
Yes, it sets the bar far too high.
Yes.
And makes it simply an intellectual process.
Well, really, any bar is too high if you're talking about something like intellectual understanding.
I agree.
Right? And I mean, there's going to be a bar in terms of what you have to do, what you have to sacrifice, the relationship, the time you have to spend, all of this. But in terms of intellectual input, it would be far too exclusionary, I think, to say that this was a requirement of belief in God.
It is. And I have a stunning example of that.
Uh-huh.
The man that married us 56 years ago was an ex-fairground heavyweight boxer of the type who went to a fairground and faced open challenge. And if you beat him, you got some money and so on. That sort of chap.
Right.
Tough, absolutely tough, uneducated, couldn't read or write. And at the age of 19, he was in a pub and all the guys were there, and a very small Salvation Army lady came in with the magazine, War Cry it's called. And he looked at her and he said, "Missy," and he lifted her with one hand and stood her on the bar. And he said, "Missy, if you sing for us, all these men will buy your War Cry." Just imagine the situation. She did.
That's kind of funny. So she comes up there with a little booklet and he says, "Sing for us and we'll all buy it."
And he, through that, started to think about Christianity and very soon became a Christian and went and sat with primary school kids to learn to read and write. Now, can you imagine that? Now, when I met him, he was a veteran preacher. He's the only man that I've ever met that could give you a summary by heart of every chapter in the Bible. Absolutely phenomenal.
Dude, you hearing this, AP? So this dude was a fighter, an open challenge fighter. You show up to an area, anyone fight me, if you win, you get this money. That's how bad the dude was. Salvation Army, little Salvation Army woman shows up. Says, hey, I got this for everybody. Says, hey, sing for us all, and then we'll pay attention to you. And then becomes the only person John Lennox has met who can take you through every book of the Bible. Guy couldn't even read or write. And then went back and learned.
And I thought, when I was a student at Cambridge, it would be interesting to bring him in amongst a bunch of very clever young people. And he came in, and I'll never forget what happened to my college, Emmanuel in Cambridge. And he gave a talk, lunchtime, short talk. Very alliterative, very simple, very down to earth. And there was a theology student, very cynical, sitting on the floor. And I can see it now. He looked up and he said, well, Mr. Ford, what about the parable of the sheep and the goats? And Stan Ford, that was his name, was very polite, and he said, well, young sir, not everybody in this room may be familiar with the parable of the sheep and the goats. So tell it to us. So this chap started to splutter and mentioned a couple of lines of it. And without batting an eyelid, Stanford finished the entire parable. And the cheering, and they loved him. And he used to come regularly to Cambridge because here was a living example of what God can do to a person. It changed his life completely, and he had a profound influence. So my wife and I invited him, she wasn't my wife then, to conduct our wedding. And those kind of examples where God meets people where they're at have been hugely important in my life. The intellectual side has been important because it's what you said is beautifully correct. That is one of the biggest evidences for God is meeting people where they're at. And I think that for me is a conclusive thing as I look back at my life. And I've been trying to record this in my autobiography. Where are the places where I really think that there's evidence for God meeting me where I'm at?
Interesting. Well, this continues. I don't know. I just think that's a really cool place to end. So the discussion continues, ladies and gentlemen. You can actually you can watch this over on Alex's channel. I really like this discussion between Alex and John Lennox. It's like, I don't know, it's like this young guy who wants to talk about things and examine things and trying to figure things out, and a guy who's old and who's seen a lot and who's been through a lot more, sharing what he's learned over the years and stuff like that. Interesting, fun stuff, man. Fun stuff. Awesome choice, Alex, for someone to interview. Let's take these last couple super chats, AP, and then we'll go ahead and sign out. 3 more. Sorry for taking you off topic, but I just spotted this headline in my X feed. China demolishes mosque and builds public toilet in its place. I just went over to X. In fact, that's why I was talking a few minutes ago, and I was clearly distracted and rambling. It was because I was at the same time going on to X and seeing if that was a thing. I recall seeing things like that in the past, so I don't know if that's new. I don't know if they did something like that now, so it just happened, or if this is just sharing an old story, because I've seen stuff like that from China before. Old report? Yeah, that's what I suspected.
There are some accounts that do this whole thing, which kind of pisses me off, where they say, breaking, this and this happened. Then I go and I look for the report, and it's actually happened like 4 years ago.
Yeah, it's annoying.
Why do you say breaking?
Yeah, quit saying breaking. Breaking news for me, because I just found this.
Just in, 2 planes fly into Twin Towers.
Breaking! Man walks on the moon. His name is Neil. My wife calls you David Goodman for some reason. Just thought I'd let you know. Hi, AP, bless brother. That's funny. And Salt here says, I got to meet Dr. Lennox last year. It was wonderful. A very sweet man, very tall. Oh, that's interesting because Alex O'Connor's tall. I think he's the same height as me. So he's around 6'3" or something like that. I'm trying to think of
Such a nice guy, man. I love that he just smiles the entire time. It has a very good tone.
Yeah, it seemed like a very, very, very friendly guy. Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
A very sweet man, very tall. Met him at the OCCA summer seminars. I think I watched one or two of those. Look it up. Yeah, cool stuff. All right, man. Anything else before we close out?
Just in.
Just
going live tomorrow.
Just in Trudeau. What?
Just in Timberlake. Are we going live tomorrow? Do you have time?
I have to say, I don't know. I've said this to you before. I don't know why I tell you anything, because there's a 0% chance that you're paying attention.
I'm not paying attention.
What I said was, as I explained it for like 10 minutes, that Monday, tomorrow, and Tuesday, day after tomorrow, IP and I had something set up from a month ago.
IP too. I don't care if you pee or not. I'm asking you if you're available tomorrow for live stream.
No. Because, as I explained, IP about a month ago said, I'm going to put out this video on the Islamic dilemma. Then we're going to give Muslims like a month to respond, and then we're going to respond to their responses. And back then he said, tomorrow, May 26th, is the day we will respond to what they have said. So that will be tomorrow. So basically, AP wants me to build a time machine, go back in time, tell IP not to set this up so that I can go live with IP tomorrow. Then what I said was, on Tuesday, IP also wanted to go through. Everyone else heard this who was there at the beginning, everyone except AP. I went on to say, we're setting up 2 because IP had these TikTok scientific miracles in the Quran videos that he wanted to go through, because we've already responded to them years before, but our responses are not on TikTok. So we're going to do that. So that was the plan. His channel on responses to the Islamic dilemma, then my channel on the scientific miracles on this TikTok stuff. And then remember AP, because this might bring something back to your memory. Then I said, hey, what if I try to replace the topic on Tuesday with the Jordan Peterson stuff? And I said, let me message him right now. I was actually messaging him while we're live. And then he's actually responding while we're live, and he agreed. So then we told everyone, somehow you miss all of this. Like, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? Should we go live?
Well, the whole messed up thing about this whole issue is that you, from what you have just described, you only pee once a month.
That's true.
So you peed once, and then you wait for a whole month to pee again, which is very, very wild. Yeah. Never heard of that before.
Huge time saver, though.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, no, I was thinking of reviewing one of those Jay Dyer debate things, or the Jay Dyer and the Dumb Twins video together. But I guess we can do that some other time.
Yeah, that is a good topic. Yeah. Wednesday, I have officially This Week in Jihad, but theoretically could go before or after that. Thursday, as far as I know, would be
based,
open and based.
Let's do it Thursday then.
Let's plan for Thursday.
Let us do so. Let us do so.
So everyone pay attention. Tomorrow I will be live with Inspiring Philosophy, Mike Jones, on his channel. We will be going through Muslim responses to the Islamic dilemma. And if you've been following our videos about the Islamic dilemma, this is different. IP posted his own video about the Islamic dilemma, given his argument and so on, and then Muslims responded to his video. That is what we're going through tomorrow. So this is different from Muslims responding to me. And then Tuesday will be on my channel, going through some clips from the Jordan Peterson Jubilee thing. You want to be in that, AP?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. We will check out some of the responses and make fun of Jordan Peterson.
I don't like making fun of people. I just want to talk about God. Yeah, no, I'm totally down with that.
Okay, so it looks like on Tuesday it'll be me, IP, and AP peeing
IP2
on the Jubilee, and then Thursday on AP's channel. Unless Robert happens to be Robert travels sometimes, unless he happens to be traveling and we want to cover it on Wednesday. But we'll let you all know what's up. And last super chat here. Jack Ray says, IP or not AP? That is the question.
Indeed, that's very, very good.
He changed to be or not to be. He said IP or not AP. That's funny. That is not the question.
That's what they do.
That's what they do. All right, everyone. We will catch you all tomorrow. If you're on IP's channel, it will be dope and based.
Hey, as we were speaking, I just designed merch for Make Istanbul Constantinople Again, and then published it. I think it's going to be become public on my channel and my live streams and videos from now on in the future. It's funny.
Hang on.
Urinating upon one another.
Who is this? This is one of the guys I'm not really familiar with.
That's what they do, man.
Oh, hey. Will be one of the guys that posted responses to Inspiring Philosophy is Dean Responds. So for you Dean Responds fans, we'll be checking that out. Tomorrow on IP's channel. We'll see if Dean Responds has been able, his video is Muslim destroys the Islamic dilemma. That is good to know. Muslim destroys the Islamic dilemma. That's pretty confident. We'll see if he's actually destroyed the Islamic dilemma. Because if anyone has destroyed the Islamic dilemma, I've never seen it. I've never even seen anything close to it. But anyway.
Urinating upon one another. That's what they do.
That's what they do. All right, guys. So it looks like we're going to have a fun week ahead of us. If I can get together my Andrew Wilson video tonight, which I think I will, be sure to check back in the morning on how Andrew Wilson is supporting the nuclear antichrist. And I can prove it using logic. That's all I need. Just logic. Catch y'all tomorrow.